Yes, good afternoon everybody. Tony and Claire with you on Drive this afternoon. We'll begin with the latest BBC News. The royal family are gathering at Balmoral after the Queen's doctors said they were concerned for her health. It's been recommended that she remains under medical supervision. Buckingham Palace says the Queen, who's 96, is comfortable. The Prince of Wales and the Princess Royal have arrived at the estate. Princes William and Harry and other members of the royal household are on their way. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell is following developments.
Clearly there is reason for great concern, and people will find it, I think, even quite disorientating. The thought that the Queen's life may be moving into its final chapter, we don't know. But the fact that all of her children are travelling to Balmoral, well, they wouldn't be doing that if there wasn't some good reason for it.
There have been best wishes for the Queen from across the political spectrum. Our political editor Chris Mason is in Downing Street.
The Prime Minister saying the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news from Buckingham Palace this lunchtime. My thoughts and those of people across our United Kingdom are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time. Sir Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, along with the rest of the country, I'm deeply worried by the news from Buckingham Palace this afternoon.
The head of the Catholic Church in England and Wales, Cardinal Vincent Nichols, is offering his prayers for the Queen and her family. In other news this afternoon, the Prime Minister has outlined what she calls a bold scheme to help protect homes and businesses from surging energy costs. Under Liz Truss's plan, the average annual household's gas and electricity bill will be capped at £2,500 for 2 years. Similar support is being offered to businesses for 6 months. The government will borrow tens of billions of pounds to fund it. Mel Stride is the Conservative chair of the Treasury Select Committee.
The area where the question marks are will be around affordability. And what's the impact of all of this, along with the tax cuts that the Prime Minister and the government are going to bring forward? What does that all come together and look like in terms of inflation and growth and our fiscal targets?
Police investigating the murder of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell have made another arrest. A 29-year-old man was detained in the West Derby area of Liverpool on suspicion of assisting an offender. And 1 in 8 people in England is on an NHS waiting list for routine operations or other care. NHS England says that's a total of 6.4 million people. It's the highest level since records began. That is the news. For now, let's get the sport. Here's Jonathan McKeith.
Tony, thank you. Good afternoon. As expected, Chelsea have named Graham Potter as their new head coach. He signed a 5-year deal after leaving Brighton and replaces Thomas Tuchel, who was sacked yesterday. Chelsea owner Todd Boehly says Potter is a proven coach and an innovator in the Premier League who fits our vision for the club. England's Tommy Fleetwood is currently the clubhouse leader after his first round at the PGA Championship at Wentworth. He carded an 8 under par 64 and is 1 shot ahead of the field. And the start of the third test between England and South Africa at the Oval has been delayed by rain. England have won the toss and chosen to bowl. A further inspection is taking place right now.
In the latest travel news, starting in Perth on the M90, there's queuing traffic in both directions at junction 12 at the Broxton roundabout. That's because of flooding. Congestion's back to junction 10 if you're heading north and south. Traffic is tailing back onto the A9 just after the Inveralbyn roundabout there. Also worth noting as well, there's some buses running instead of trains on ScotRail on some routes because of flooding in Perth. So just check before you travel there. It might take you a little bit longer. On the M5 northbound, there's queuing traffic for 7 miles between Dudley at junction 2 and the M6 interchange. You look at delays about 30 minutes there. Elsewhere on the M5 northbound, there's 2 lanes closed at junction 9 for Tewkesbury to junction 8. There was a vehicle fire earlier on and that's being cleared at the moment, which is causing traffic for 9 miles and there's delays of 45 minutes. And on the M27 eastbound, 3 lanes are closed from junction 8 for Hamble to junction 9. That's because of an accident. Expect delays because it's looking pretty slow. Ellie Brennan, 5 Live Travel.
5 Live Drive.
Claire McDonnell and Tony Livesey.
Good afternoon. Welcome to 5 Live Drive. Tony Livesey and Claire McDonnell with you this afternoon. We will be bringing you news, of course, of the energy bill announcement that the Prime Minister Liz Truss announced, the cap. She announced that in the Commons earlier today. So we will be bringing you details of that on the programme this afternoon. But understandably, the focus of an awful lot of what we will be talking about over the next 3 hours is the fact that the Queen, as you've been hearing, is at Balmoral under medical supervision. Her doctors are worried about her health, and her 4 children are with her. Back in June, the Queen celebrated her Platinum Jubilee, of course. The bank holiday weekend finished with a massive concert outside Buckingham Palace. The night started with a specially recorded segment of the Queen meeting Paddington Bear.
As Claire said, we'll be reflecting a lot on the current situation at the moment. In the past few minutes, a plane's arrived at Aberdeen Airport carrying, we understand, the Duke of York and the Duke of Cambridge, and also the Earl and Countess of Wessex on their way to Balmoral. The political reaction today has been widespread and obviously very sympathetic to the situation. The new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, says the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says he's deeply worried and joins everyone in hoping for the Queen's recovery. The news about the Queen was revealed as MPs debated the government's new energy plans. Keir Starmer was on his feet at the time. The BBC's Caroline Quinn was watching.
As he was speaking, we saw the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Nadim Zahawi, come into the chamber, very unusual actually, walking in and out, squeezed onto the front bench, whispered something to the Prime Minister. He left, he came back a few minutes later, passed her a note. She looked extremely concerned and all eyes were turned towards the Speaker's chair. He gave her a note. She tucked that inside a red folder. More notes were passed, we believe, to the Speaker himself and then to Sir Keir Starmer, who was actually on his feet at the time. His deputy, Angela Rayner, sitting next to him, made sure that he saw the note. Once he'd stopped speaking, he and she left the chamber pretty briskly. The Prime Minister as well, the front bench of the Labour Party moved out. Some returned, including Sir Keir Starmer, but the sombre faces really did say it all. We knew at that point something was happening.
Well, that was the BBC's Caroline Quinn, who was in Parliament earlier. Well, moments later, the Commons Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, had this to say.
I wish to say something about the announcement which has just been made about Her Majesty. I know I speak on behalf of the entire House when I say that we send our best wishes to Her Majesty the Queen and that she and the royal family are in our thoughts and prayers at this moment. I'm going to take no more, if there is anything else, we will update the House accordingly.
Speaker of the House of Commons, Lindsay Hoyle, speaking earlier. Let's talk to our royal correspondent, Johnny Diamond, who joins us now with the latest. Johnny, welcome to the programme. Let's go back then. A few hours ago, we have a statement from Buckingham Palace. What did it say?
Well, it was short, as many of these statements are, but it was the fact that it was made at all that was perhaps so surprising and concerning. It simply said, following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remains under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral. And as I say, the fact that there was any statement is a surprise and an indication of how serious this is. The palace is loath to discuss the Queen's health in any detail. The Queen herself has made it clear that she thinks it is nobody's business. And so it is a sign of seriousness that the statement was made, but is also what was within the fact that it specified that the doctors were concerned, that word, a serious one, and the description of the Queen remaining comfortable. I mean, read into that what you will. I'm not going to spend hours speculating about her health, obviously. But that was a very serious moment. And then the news started to come out of the palace, announcements from the palace that other members of the royal family were making their way to Balmoral, where the Queen is. First, that the Prince of Wales was going there, then that the Duke of Cambridge, the second in line to the throne, and then gradually the word came out that all of the Queen's children and some of her grandchildren were either at Balmoral or making their way there. And those three things, the statement, the content of the statement itself, and the fact that so many members of the royal family are making their way towards Balmoral, a clear indication of some seriousness of the situation. It's worth saying we have heard nothing from the palace since then. They've made it very clear that they're not going to keep issuing statements. It would be very surprising if they would. But meanwhile, as we were hearing there from Caroline Quinn, various parts of the machinery of state, the legislature, the House of Commons, has been open about their concerns. We've seen tweets come out, and from the Archbishop of Canterbury as well, best wishes, and from around the world as well, leaders issuing their sort of best wishes towards the royal family, towards the Queen.
We are seeing pictures in the last few moments of a plane landing at Aberdeen Airport. Apparently, we know it was carrying the Duke of Cambridge, the Duke of York, and the Earl and Countess of Wessex.
Yeah.
Do we know how many other members of the royal family have already gathered or are on their way?
Well, we know that all four children, that is, for those who don't spend their time thinking about dukes and duchesses and earls, that is Prince Andrew, Prince Charles, Princess Anne and Prince Edward, are all either there or making their way there. And Prince Edward's wife, the Countess of Wessex, also known as Sophie, we understand was on the plane as well, but also Prince William, and Prince Harry as well are making their way to Balmoral. Again, the palace, the palace sort of has this tension within it. It understands the need to keep the public informed both about the state of the Queen and also about movements of members of the royal family, but it doesn't want to get caught in a situation where it is continually commenting or in its own phrase, giving a running commentary on who is where and what is happening. And so it's relatively tight-lipped. And I'm afraid in the absence of that, there is this enormous swirl of rumours. Some sort of tolerably well sourced. A lot of it is nonsense, and it's worth bearing that in mind. There is an awful lot of rubbish out there. We have various bits of news that we know about. We know, as I say, that the Queen's doctors are concerned for her, that she is remaining at Balmoral, she is comfortable, that the family is making its way there, and that is a sign of seriousness. Beyond that, you can pretty much discount anything else you've heard because it is either very badly sourced or frankly being made up by people.
Yes, there's an awful lot of speculation, but I guess what we can look at is recent events when she met the new Prime Minister Liz Truss. Now, that would have normally been a meeting that would have happened in London, but she remained in Balmoral, and that's the first time that's happened, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's the first time it's happened. I mean, I have to say, I wasn't terribly surprised by that. I mean, let's remember, Queen is 96, a journey all the way down from Scotland to Buckingham Palace to do this ceremony called kissing hands with the new Prime Minister, effectively, when the Queen calls on the Prime Minister to form a new government. A journey to do that for a 96-year-old woman, only to go all the way back when we know she has mobility problems, did seem quite a big ask of a woman who has given so much. But then yesterday came an indication that things were perhaps not all right, despite the fact that there were photographs we saw on Tuesday of the Queen looking positively cheery as she greeted Liz Truss. Despite that, on Wednesday, a meeting of what's called the Privy Council, which is effectively the swearing in of the new Prime Minister and of the new cabinet. That meeting was going to be a virtual one. It was going to be done over video, but the palace said that was being rearranged essentially because the Queen was very tired after a full day. And even then, it rather felt as if it was, not run of the mill, but it was not an extraordinary event because, again, the Queen is really quite old and has clearly become tired. And then this statement, though, which really was quite a surprise, coming just before midday. Again, no detail as to what the medical situation is, but we know that the Queen has been suffering from what is described as episodic mobility problems. Essentially, she struggles to move around unaided, and that's why she has withdrawn from a fair number of very high-profile state occasions over the last few months. She wasn't at the Remembrance Day ceremony last November, and that's something that is so close to her heart. She was not at the state opening of Parliament. She was not seen much at the Platinum Jubilee. I mean, there were 3 appearances on the balcony, and that was about it. And she has been really either at Windsor, and people have either come to her or conducted audiences with her by video over computer, or she's been at Balmoral. She has been out of public sight for a while. But until today, there was no real indication that there was anything particular wrong apart from those mobility problems. Now we do have a very clear sign that something is wrong, and that it is probably quite serious because of the fact that the family is gathering round.
Johnny, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the update. Our royal correspondent, Johnny Diamond.
Yes, and there'll inevitably, as Johnny was saying, there'll be a lot of discussion this afternoon about the situation as it stands. Just to remind you, in the past few moments, a plane has landed in Aberdeen, we're told, carrying the Duke of York, the Duke of Cambridge and the Earl of Countess of Wessex as they make the next stage of their journey to Balmoral to be with the Queen. And Johnny was saying that is unlikely to be a further statement from Buckingham Palace in the foreseeable future. It's worth reminding ourselves of what we heard this morning when they did release that statement. It said, following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral. Well, that statement emerged as Parliament was discussing Liz Truss's proposals regarding energy prices as we move forward. So let's have a quick chat now to our political correspondent, Leila Nathu. Leila, hello to you.
Afternoon, Tony.
We heard a bit of audio from the Commons a few moments ago about the moment the Speaker got to his feet and kind of summarised that statement and wished the Queen well. Take us through what happened this afternoon and what heads of parties have said variously throughout the day.
Well, it was quite a strange turn of events, I have to say, in the Commons, because, of course, us Westminster watchers were all primed for the announcement of the energy policy. This big policy announcement has been trailed. The Commons was absolutely packed to hear it. And it was the usual kind of cut and thrust of debate. Liz Truss had made her opening statement. Keir Starmer had responded. There were various interjections about the policy. You know, a big moment in just days into Liz Truss's premiership, where she was announcing this huge policy that's going to affect everyone. And then suddenly there was a sort of a bit of confusion that Nadhim Zahawi, who is now in the Cabinet Office, he came and sort of whispered something to Liz Truss. It wasn't clear what was going on. Keir Starmer was on his feet, so Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner also got passed a note. Then suddenly Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker, was also seemingly being briefed about something. And then it became quite clear that something was afoot, if you like. And then the statement from Buckingham Palace made its way to us. So then it was clear that that is what had happened. And then you had Keir Starmer and Liz Truss leave the chamber and Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker, make that statement that you mentioned earlier. And so it was a very strange juxtaposition of the kind of cut and thrust of politics suddenly being interrupted by something that was sort of far greater concern, and immediately the atmosphere changed. I mean, in the event, just on the energy policy, the debate did actually continue after some time, and Liz Truss and Keir Starmer did return to the chamber eventually to sort of complete that debate. But obviously immediately as the news came in, we had Liz Truss and Keir Starmer making their statements. Liz Truss saying the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news from Buckingham Palace this lunchtime when the statement first came out. My thoughts and the thoughts of people across the UK are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time. Sir Keir Starmer similarly saying, along with the rest of the country, I am deeply worried about the news from Buckingham Palace this afternoon. My thoughts are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time. I join everyone across the UK in hoping for her recovery. So, and similar statements from the Labour leader, Sir Ed Davey, from Nicola Sturgeon too. So clearly then a very different mood across the Commons when, MPs were just back from their summer holidays this week, gearing up for this big sort of debate over this policy. Suddenly, Parliament was sort of a bit of a ghost town, really, and there was a definite sombre mood.
Yeah, for those listening who want a bit more detail on what was discussed about energy today, we are going to touch on that before 4:30, so we'll bring you that shortly. As far as the political world is concerned, though, Leila, I'm just going to report from Reuters here saying at the moment, certainly the Prime Minister has no plans to travel to Scotland. Do we assume that the political world, the Westminster world, carries on as normal, or the political agenda?
Yes, I mean, until we hear otherwise. I mean, there definitely seems to be a kind of pause button, if you like, on the kind of political agenda. I mean, you could have imagined what we would have spent this afternoon discussing and unpicking all the details of the energy policy, which, of course, is still going on in the background, but there is very much a cloud over, and a question mark over what is going to happen until we hear another update from Buckingham Palace. So, yes, for now, Parliament is still sitting. Liz Truss is in Westminster and, I'm sure is awaiting briefings herself. But yes, I think there's definitely a sense of anticipation, a kind of watching and waiting. But immediately after the news, we heard the news from Buckingham Palace this lunchtime, certainly the mood in Westminster shifted.
Leila, thank you for now. That's our political correspondent, Leila Nathu. Just to remind you then, just before 4:30, we will touch on the detail that was announced in Parliament today, if you're waiting to find out Liz Truss's proposals for dealing with energy prices. It's 4:20 now on Drive.
And of course, there's a huge amount of interest around the world in this story. All eyes on Balmoral, because the Queen is head of state for 15 countries in the Commonwealth. Let's talk to Dr. Linda Yu, Executive Chair of the Royal Commonwealth Society. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
What are your thoughts then on I mean, it's very difficult to say what is going on, but clearly she is a woman who's had an incredible reach around the world for the 7 decades that she has reigned so far.
She certainly has. She's been head of the Commonwealth for 70 years, and so her Platinum Jubilee year marks a milestone. And the Commonwealth, I think, has been, excuse me, has greatly benefited from her commitment, especially to the people of the Commonwealth, to the young people. And so the Commonwealth, just as a reminder, encompasses 56 countries and about 2.5 billion people, so about a third of the world's population. And as you say, just over a dozen countries also have the Queen as their head of state. But all Commonwealth countries, I'm sure at this time, are like all of us here in the UK, sending our thoughts and our prayers to Her Majesty, the Queen. And as Chair of the Royal Commonwealth Society, she is our patron, and I've had the pleasure of witnessing the Queen's commitment to the Commonwealth, and particularly to issues around young people, around service, around the environment. And she has had an extraordinary impact already, and we wish her a very speedy recovery to continue that impact across so much of the world's, especially young people.
Yeah, I know you have met her on several occasions, haven't you, through her involvement with the Commonwealth charities and the groups that you're involved in. Why is she so passionate about that?
I think she believes in the values that the Commonwealth strives to stand for. So where I've had the good fortune of seeing a very actively engaged patron. She's actually the patron also of about 250 Commonwealth charities, but the Royal Commonwealth Society that I'm the chair of is the oldest charity dedicated to the Commonwealth. So we organise highlights in the Commonwealth calendar, like the Commonwealth service at Westminster Abbey that the Queen had attended every year, actually until this year when she cancelled at the last minute due to mobility problems. And that service embodies a lot of the values that she wants to stress. So our theme this year was around public service, what you can do beyond yourself for your community. So she leads by example. Her commitment to charitable causes, I think, is extremely well known. And through the Commonwealth, she's focused on young people. I've seen her stand for a long time, talking to young people. The Queen's Young Leaders, a program that we were involved in at Buckingham Palace. I witnessed her listening to and congratulating a leader selected from every Commonwealth country, a young person who has done extraordinary things. I think it's that where she has made a real imprint in people's lives. And, and I think she has been a huge force in the Commonwealth, really making what the Commonwealth is today.
Thank you so much for joining us, Linda. Dr. Linda Yu there, Executive Chair of the Royal Commonwealth Society.
Oh, you're listening to Drive with Claire and Tony. Just a reminder of the latest news as far as the royal family is concerned this afternoon, that a few minutes ago, a private plane landed at Aberdeen Airport. That was carrying the Duke of York, the Duke of Cambridge and the Earl of Countess and Countess of Wessex. They are now on their way to Balmoral. Prince Charles, Camilla, already there. Prince William on his way too. The only official statement so far today we've had from Buckingham Palace is this. It says, following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral.
Yes, so just to reiterate, the royal family are arriving at Balmoral. Prince Charles, Camilla, Princess Anne are already there. And as Tony was saying, we've seen the pictures in the last 10 minutes or so of a plane arriving at Aberdeen Airport, which was carrying the Duke of Cambridge, Duke of York and the Earl and Countess of Wessex. And we will also, of course, bring you news of the government's plans for support with energy bills next. We'll keep you up to date as well with news of the Queen's health throughout Drive this evening.
5 Live Drive.
Tony Livesey and Claire McDonnell.
On that note, then, we'll just move away from concerns about the Queen's health for just a moment to talk about energy. Liz Truss has announced that there will be an energy price cap then in England, Scotland and Wales. It's going to last for 2 years and we'll see typical bills being capped at £2,500. The huge support scheme could cost up to £150 billion, but the new Prime Minister says extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures.
This guarantee, which includes a temporary suspension of green levies, means that from the 1st of October, a typical household will pay no more than £2,500 per year for each of the next 2 years while we get the energy market back on track.
Yeah. The Prime Minister also announced help for people who are not on gas.
For those using heating oil, living in park homes or those on heat networks, we will set up a fund so that all UK consumers can benefit from equivalent support.
And here's what she said about help for businesses.
We will also support all businesses, charities and public sector organisations with their energy costs this winter, offering an equivalent guarantee for 6 months. After those 6 months, we will provide further support to vulnerable sectors such as hospitality, including our local pubs.
Well, Liz Truss has confirmed the proposals won't be funded by a windfall tax because she thinks that would discourage investment. The new Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, will set out the expected costs of the package later this month. There are concerns the measures are not targeted enough, with no additional support for the most vulnerable. They've been criticised by the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer.
Ask voters whether they think that it's fair that they pick up the bill or those companies that made profits they didn't expect to make, and there's only one answer to that question. It's a very simple question of whose side are you on?
Well, for his part, the leader of the SNP at Westminster, Ian Blackford, says sea power should be given more attention.
What we should be doing is prioritising tidal. There's an excellent Royal Society report from last year that indicates we can get to 11.5 gigawatts. I'm asking the government to enhance the ring-fence pot from 20 to 50 million. You'll get the baseload you need and you won't need nuclear energy.
Well, if you want great detail about what was said today in Liz Truss's energy plans, they're there for you on the BBC News website. Let's speak now to our personal finance correspondent, Kevin Peachy. Hello, Kevin.
Hello.
Let's start with domestic users then. Obviously, people were trying to work out how they are going to be helped. So what level of detail was there? What does this amount of £2,500 mean to individual consumers?
Well, that is an illustration. Really important to make that point. It's a cap, sure, but it's a cap on each unit, on the price of each unit of energy. So £2,500 is the maximum you'd spend if you use a typical amount of gas and electricity. Clearly, if you live in a big drafty house, then you could have a bill that's higher than that. And if you live in a small, well-insulated flat, then you'll be paying less. So that's the annual fee. Remember, that typical household was paying about £1,277 a year last winter, and now paying about £2,000 a year, but was expecting in October for that bill to go up to about £3,500. So it's down to £2,500, and really significantly that they are continuing with the cost of living payments, which we've been talking about for a few months now. That includes a £400 discount on everyone's bill over this winter, and also extra help for those on low incomes and in receipt of benefits, or pensioners and so on. So put that all together, you're not a million miles away from where we are at the moment over the coming winter. Clearly the guarantee lasts for 2 years, these cost of living payments just for this winter.
Right. The mechanics, Kevin, as far as we know then, how does this work?
Well, it should all happen automatically. So it will be in discussion with suppliers, who are going to have to move pretty fast, because this is a change to what they're expecting in October. But they will automatically sort of limit the prices on your tariff. And so this is 24 million odd people in England, Wales, and Scotland who will end up paying less than they might have expected. So you're probably going to get a direct debit. If you pay by direct debits, you're going to have a direct debit demand come through in the next few weeks, which will be slightly lower than you might have expected in October. If you pay by prepayment meter, well, that's again is all sort of done automatically for you. If you're in Northern Ireland, now remember, Northern Ireland is not covered by the price cap like the rest of the UK. Well, what the Prime Minister said today is that the same level of support will be provided to households in Northern Ireland, but this will require legislation. So clearly more detail to come on that.
Over the past few weeks and months on this programme and on this station, to be fair, we've had a lot of fearful business owners saying that they simply couldn't cope because there was no cap on their energy bills. So that there was a bit of solace from the Prime Minister today. How much detail was there for business owners?
Not a huge amount, and the reason for that mainly is because it is a very complex picture. So there is support for businesses. For only for 6 months, so for this winter, unlike households, which is for 2 years. But there is going to be support. There's going to be some kind of cap. They say there's a sort of equivalent deal. But I think where businesses are going to be supported the most is if they are on a variable deal at the moment, which is very expensive, or if they're coming to the end of their contract, their end of their fixed deal, and are just about to move on to something else that looks either a variable deal or another fixed deal that looks very expensive, they will receive the assistance. If you are a business which negotiated a deal, say, a month ago or something, and just thought, gosh, this is really expensive, but I'm just going to have to cope with it, then I think probably initially at least you're not going to see much support.
Kevin, listen, thank you very much for now on that. That's Kevin Peach, our personal finance correspondent. If you require any further information on that, we will touch on this story again on Drive today. But if you want more details now, then just go to the BBC News website. A lot of everything's explained there, including an indication of how much you might be helped by these proposals. So go and have a look at the BBC News website. You're listening to Drive with Tony and Claire. It's now 4:32.
Listen on BBC Sounds. This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
And here are the news headlines. The royal family are gathering at Balmoral after the Queen's doctors said they were concerned for her health. Buckingham Palace says the Queen, who's 96, is comfortable. The Prince of Wales and the Princess Royal have arrived at the estate, whilst Prince William and Prince Harry are on their way. The Prime Minister, Liz Truss, says she's deeply concerned about the news, whilst Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says he's hoping for her recovery. The Prime Minister has today outlined her plans to help protect homes and businesses from surging energy costs. The average annual household gas and electricity bill will be capped at £2,500 for 2 years. And a further arrest has been made by detectives investigating the murder of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell. A 29-year-old man is being questioned on suspicion of assisting an offender. Let's get the sports news. Here's Jonathan.
Claire, thank you. Chelsea have confirmed the appointment of Graham Potter as their new head coach. He leaves Brighton to sign a 5-year contract at Stamford Bridge and replaces the sacked Thomas Tuchel. The Southampton manager Ralph Hasenhüttl is a fan of the Englishman's work.
I must congratulate them for a very good choice, I must say. For me, he is the manager in the past 2 years that had the biggest impact in a club where, with all the limits they had, with all the transfers that they gave away for other clubs, still competing on the highest level, shows how good this group was.
The Brighton under-21 coach Andrew Crofts will take interim charge of the first team at the Amex. The Europa League group stages begin tonight with Arsenal away at FC Zurich and Manchester United at home to Real Sociedad. In the Europa Conference League, West Ham host Romanian side FCSB, while Hearts welcome Istanbul Başakşehir. To golf, and there's now 3 Englishmen at the top of the leaderboard on day 1 of the PGA Championship. Let's go live to our golf correspondent Ian Carter.
And really very, very wet conditions now. The rain hammering down on the west course, but a very strong leaderboard from an English point of view, with Andy Sullivan now joining Tommy Fleetwood at the top after completing an 8 under par 64. In third place we have Matthew Jordan, another Englishman, 7 under after his round of 65, and a fine opening 66 from Shane Lowry. Rory McIlroy was round in 68. Billy Horschel, the defending champion, matched that in the same group, and the US Open winner Matt Fitzpatrick was round in a 3 under par 69.
Ian, for now, thank you. Worcester Warriors flanker Matt Kvesic says the last few weeks at the club have been tough. He's been speaking ahead of their Premiership opener against London Irish. Uncertainty remains around the future of the club after they were served with a winding up petition by HMRC over unpaid tax. Kvesic says it's been a stressful time for all involved.
It doesn't really matter what we think, because we can't control what's going on up there anyway. We are just rugby players. We're the pawns on the chessboard that get pushed about and go out and play on a weekend. So it's that's what we've got to do. That's our job. Like I said, we've been paid last month, albeit a little bit late, but that's it now. We've had a great training week, to be fair. We've had a really, really good training week.
And Lewis Hamilton will start this Sunday's Italian Grand Prix in Monza from the back of the grid. The 7-time world champion has been handed an engine penalty for taking his 4th power unit of the campaign, one more than is allowed under Formula 1 rules. For now, though, that's your latest from BBC Sport.
In the latest travel news, in Perth on the M90, there's queuing traffic in both directions at junction 12 at the Broxton roundabout. That's because of flooding. Congestion's back to junction 10 if you're heading north and south. Traffic is tailing back onto the A9 just after the Inveralmond roundabout. Also worth noting, some buses are running instead of trains on some routes on ScotRail. That's because of that flooding in Perth as well. So there could be some delays there. In West Yorkshire, back on the roads on the M62 eastbound, 2 lanes are closed before junction 28 for Tingley. That's because of an accident, and traffic starting to look pretty slow there, so expect some delays. On the M5 northbound, there's long delays, 10 miles of queuing traffic from junction 9 for Tewkesbury to junction 8. There was a vehicle fire earlier. That's all been cleared now. All lanes are back open, but still a bit of congestion back to Gloucester and along the A38 towards Tewkesbury. Looking at delays for about half an hour there. On the M25 anti-clockwise, 1 lane is closed from junction 12 to 11 for Chertsey. That's because of an accident. Congestion is back to junction 13 for Staines and back onto the M3 towards junction 3 as traffic's trying to join the M25. And on the M27 eastbound, 3 lanes are closed from junction 8 for Hamble to junction 9 because of an accident, so expect delays. Ellie Brennan, 5 Live Travel.
5 Live Drive.
Tony Livesey and Claire McDonald.
You are listening to 5 Live Drive with Tony and Claire. We are bringing you news, as we have been over the last few hours here on 5 Live, that the Queen is at Balmoral under medical supervision. Her doctors are worried about her health, but the palace say the 96-year-old monarch remains comfortable. Now, back in June, the Queen celebrated her Platinum Jubilee. The bank holiday weekend finished with a huge concert outside Buckingham Palace, where Prince Charles spoke about his mother's service to the country.
The scale of this evening's celebration and the outpouring of warmth and affection over this whole Jubilee weekend is our way of saying thank you. Thank you from your family, the country, the Commonwealth, in fact, the whole world. On behalf of us all, I wanted to pay my own tribute to your lifetime of selfless service, in pictures, in words, and in light. Your family now spans 4 generations. You are our head of state, and you are also our mother.
Let's talk now to Professor Kate Williams, a royal historian. Good afternoon, Kate.
Good afternoon.
It's moments like this that remind us of the significance of her role in this country, and for her to have been the longest serving monarch this country has ever had is hugely significant.
Yes, it's hugely significant. The longest serving monarch, over 70 years on the throne, and the second longest reigning monarch in the world. And Louis XIV was the longest reigning monarch of France, but he did come to the throne as a child. So if you're looking at monarchs who came to the throne as an adult, she is the world's longest reigning monarch as well. I mean, the scale of her reign, she was born in 1926, the age of the flapper. Women, not all women had the vote, and she's seen globalization, technology. Her coronation was televised. It's a reign of great change in so many ways, political, technological, and she's always been a stable constant throughout it.
We were hearing earlier on 5 Live that her sense, and this was from royal biographer Robert Hardman, that her sense of duty predated her accession to the throne. This is something that was always incredibly important to her.
Yes, she's always been a dutiful child, a conscientious child, and when she was 21, she gave a speech to the nation, and to the empire. There was still an empire, much of it under oppression and exploitation. She said that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be dedicated to your service, and that's what she's always done. She's always dedicated her life to service. She signs herself in letters very recently as your servant, and that's how she sees her role as its duty and its service.
There have been wars, there have been political conflicts and fallouts. She has seen innumerable prime ministers and the most recent cross her threshold just earlier this week. She's lived through some incredibly significant moments in the history of the world, hasn't she?
Yes, she is one of the few people who can remember the World War II, the ravages, the suffering. And as you say, she's met all the prime ministers. 15th was yesterday, Elizabeth Truss, and she's met 13 out of 14 of the presidents. Lyndon Johnson she didn't meet. And she's lived through this great change in the world. And I think because she lived through the suffering, the horror of World War II, because she saw it all, what's been so important to her is the purpose of peace, is that she can try however much she can in her diplomatic role, in the role as monarch, to try and really say that we should try and live together in peace. As she said in her speech in the state visit to the Republic of Ireland in 2011, through sustained effort, peace can and will prevail. And historians of the future who look at her legacy, that will be the legacy that she wishes to leave.
Why do you think it is that many people who may not even agree with the institution of the monarchy would still regard the Queen as the mother of the nation? What is it about her that connects with so many people?
I think there's a huge admiration for her. I think that she has given her life to it. She wasn't expected to be the Queen. She was a little girl who was expected to make an aristocratic marriage. Everything changed when her uncle died. She was someone who's given her life, who's sacrificed so much. So what you have are many people who are anti-monarchy, and they say, well, I'm anti the monarchy, but I do think that the Queen, she's a woman who's really tried her best and done a good job. So there's a lot of respect for her. But I think we mustn't confuse respect for her with respect for the monarchy. I think that if the Queen was to be no longer here, I think there may be some changing perceptions of the monarchy, certainly. And we've seen a lot of countries saying they're going to no longer have the Queen as head of state. Barbados has already done it. Jamaica's talking of it. So Belize. I think this will accelerate if the Queen would no longer be here.
She's weathered some very difficult times, hasn't she? And criticism as well around the death of Diana, Princess of Wales, about the delay in addressing the nation in recent times as well. She has had to handle the fallout from Prince Harry and Meghan Markle deciding to step away from royal duties. A lot of these situations must have caused her incredible personal pain.
I think Diana's death was very painful for her, and most of all, it was not just very painful, but also then she is suddenly very criticised for having not come to London, having remaining in Balmoral, and she gave an address to the nation as a grandmother, talking of Diana's gifts, and really the monarchy was very vulnerable at that point. She's incredibly popular now. This was not the case in 1997. And she's someone who has, been through so much and always been there. And I think she's someone who recognises that the public's love cannot be relied upon.
It was very interesting, wasn't it, that the Queen's Christmas Day address that she gave in the midst of COVID, when everybody was locked down, when people had lost so many relatives and people close to them. That was an incredibly personal address, wasn't it? That connected her again with people and their personal tragedy across the country.
This was a very significant moment when she gave a speech saying that she talked about COVID and the emergency services, but she also said, we will meet again, we will see our families again. And that was so heartening because it made us think she's lived through the war, these incredibly dark times. People came out of the other side, and we hope the same for us. So she is there as a rallying point. She does give people hope.
What do you think? We look, and we have been looking for quite some time, haven't we, given her age, about the next generation that comes through. It's a very different prospect that the next generation of the royal family inherit, isn't it?
It is very different. It's a very different prospect. The monarchy is going to be different. It's going to be very much smaller in the future. We're seeing great changes. The Commonwealth is going to, I think we may see it fragment. We're going to see no more, but fewer countries having her as head of state. And simply, the Queen's popularity has been so incredible that who could possibly kind of repeat it, really? So she has really revolutionised the monarchy in terms of focusing on service as opposed to focusing on reigning as the monarchs did before. And political neutrality as well. It's a hard act to follow.
We have to remember the picture of her as well at her dear husband's Prince Philip's funeral, sitting there on her own, reminding the nation of the sacrifice that she has made her entire life. That was an incredibly powerful image, wasn't it?
That was incredibly powerful, an incredibly powerful image in which, apparently the government told her that she could, have different rules than the rest of us. But she said, no, I don't want to. I don't want to have different rules. I want to be like everyone else. And that was really poignant that, so many people couldn't mourn their loved ones. It was terrible, and couldn't have funerals. So she felt very strongly that I shouldn't get special treatment if they can't mourn their loved ones in the way they wish to, with kind of close funerals or all hugging each other and having meals together. Then I don't want to either.
Kate, thank you so much for joining us. Professor Kate Williams there, royal historian, joining us on 5 Live Drive. 14 minutes to 5.
Just worth reminding ourselves where this story lies at the moment. Prince Charles and Camilla are with the Queen at Balmoral. Prince William is on his way without his wife, Kate, who stayed behind in London. Also, it's been announced in the past few moments that Harry, the Duke of Sussex, is making his way without his wife either to Balmoral. And this afternoon, just as we came on air, a plane landed carrying, amongst others, the Duke of York, the Duke of Cambridge and the Earl of Countess of Wessex as the royal family gather around the Queen at Balmoral. The only official statement we've had from Buckingham Palace today was short but significant this morning. It said, following further evaluation, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remains under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable. And at Balmoral, our royal correspondent Johnny Diamond said earlier, that is all we're expecting officially for the palace for the time being. We, of course, continue to monitor this story here on 5 Live and on Drive. It's 4:47 now.
5 Live Drive.
Claire McDonnell and Tony Livesey.
Now, just moving away from royal news for a moment, we'll look again at the energy situation in a second. Liz Truss made a significant announcement in the Commons this afternoon about help for domestic users and business users. So we'll assess that in a moment. But just to turn to the world of sport briefly, there's a test match trying to get underway today at the Oval. Ellie Oldroyd's there for us. Ellie, hi.
Hello, Tony. Yes, we won't have any play today at the Oval, this final test match of the summer between England and South Africa, with the series poised at 1 win each. There was a lot of rain overnight in London, heavy showers this morning as well. A number of inspections. We've had the covers on for most of the day, but just in the last few minutes, they've announced that there will be no play today. We did have the toss in a brief spell of sunny weather this morning, in which England's Ben Stokes won the toss and decided to bowl first. So when this test match does eventually get underway, we will see South Africa bat first. But there will be a full refund for all spectators who've come and waited patiently for something to happen at the Oval today. But it is all off for today.
Ellie, thank you very much indeed. Just before we move on, we are going to talk energy in just a second. Another line on Meghan Markle. I mentioned a moment ago that it's been announced that the Duke of Sussex will travel to Balmoral on his own. It's understood that Meghan will remain in London but won't attend the Well Child Awards, a charity event that she was due to, and could potentially join Harry in Scotland at a later date. So that's the very latest as far as Harry and Meghan is concerned. Right, 4:49.
And of course, other very important news today. The new Prime Minister Liz Truss has set out new plans to help people and businesses struggling with high energy bills. She made the announcement in the House of Commons earlier.
This guarantee means that from the 1st of October, a typical household will pay no more than £2,500 per year for each of the next 2 years. We will also support all businesses, charities and public sector organisations offering an equivalent guarantee for 6 months.
Well, it means energy bill rises for all households will be limited for 2 years. A typical household energy bill will be capped at £2,500 annually until 2024. Now, this huge support scheme could cost up to £150 billion. Businesses will get help too. Prices will be capped for 6 months. The help will be for everyone in England, Scotland and Wales. The equivalent assistance will be given to Northern Ireland, but legislation is required there. There are concerns that the measures don't go far enough. Labour's leader, Sir Keir Starmer, for example, says working people will pay the price for the government's refusal to enforce a further windfall tax on oil and gas companies. We're told the Chancellor will spell out exactly how the government plan to pay for this in the coming weeks. So let's get some reaction to this news today. First of all, Peter Ensinger joins us, who owns a pizza takeaway business in Creswell in Nottinghamshire. Hi, Peter. Hello, Peter. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah,
yeah, I've got you loud and clear. Peter,
yeah.
Peter, just before we get your reaction to today's news, as far as businesses are concerned, how have things been for you? What level of rises were you facing?
Well, my electricity and gas has literally gone up from the gas has gone up from 6 pence a unit from January, and then literally from January till now, it's just like at least quadrupled in price now. So because it started off at 6 pence, and then they literally put it up again yesterday to 25 pence a kilowatt from the gas.
Right. So how's that affected your business?
Well, it's basically meaning that I have to put up my prices a bit, but I have to be careful how much I do put my prices up because I've got stiff competition around me. So basically it means that I have to take a cut in what I can take out of the business myself personally, and have to reduce my opening hours slightly and also reduce my staffing levels. Yeah,
so I gather you're working at the moment within the business, and I read here as well, just in the notes, Peter, that you can't close down because you've signed a guarantee for the lease, so you would have to continue to pay the rent even if the business didn't exist.
That's right. When I'd have to, if I closed it down, I'd have to quite literally mothball it until somebody else takes over the business, but still continue paying the rent because of this personal guarantee that I have to sign for the lease.
How do you feel today now that Liz Truss has, because up until now, from what we can gather, that there was no help proposed for businesses and no cap, but she said there will be a cap for 6 months?
Well, I feel they're just literally kicking the tin down the road sort of thing. So what help are they going to give us after that 6 months? You know, she did mention that they're going to help some vulnerable businesses like in hospitality and the like. But what I'm worried is if they exclude takeaways like they did when they did the Omicron variant of the coronavirus pandemic, they allowed sit-in restaurants to have a grant, but they didn't give any to takeaway shops.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the issues today. The announcement's been very kind of broad brushstroke, hasn't it? So
exactly. It's been very, very broad, and there's no. It's basically the devil's in the detail. What she's going to come up with. So
yeah, let's assume for a moment that you are included in this. What level of relief is there, Peter? Because I don't run a business, but I'm imagining if there was no cap, then you know the worry would have been endless about just how high things can go. So if you are included, does it give you any relief to know at least for 6 months these bills are not going to escalate beyond all belief?
Exactly. That will help for the next 6 months, because the energy company I'm with, they're very, very quick to put prices up, and I'm paying over the odds for it anyway in the first place. But unfortunately, I'm tied into a 5-year contract with this company, or we've got another 2.5 years of it to go. And it's what they call it a market tracker, which basically means that it's a variable rate. So they just put it on as and when they feel like it, basically.
Yeah. So look, for now, you're waiting to find out if you're included in this help. Let's hope you are. But the business goes on, Peter. How have customers reacted? Are they sympathetic that you've had to put prices up a little bit?
I've not seen much of a drop in sales. So, our customers, normally, a lot of our customers were once buying a 12-inch pizza, and now they seem to be buying a 9-inch pizza, obviously because they need to control their costs as well. And obviously I've had to put the prices up. So obviously they're buying the smaller pizza, whereas before they would buy a bigger one.
Yeah, well, look, as I've said, Peter, we wish you all the best. I hope you're included in that help. Potentially, when more detail comes out, we may well speak to you again. Thanks for your time today.
That's right. That's great. Yeah, good
Cheers.
to talk to you.
Thank you. Peter Ensinger there, who owns a pizza takeaway business in Nottinghamshire.
Let's bring in Tracy Gibson now, food bank worker in Derby. Afternoon, Tracy.
Good afternoon.
What do you think to what you've heard then? Will this help you?
No, I don't think it will really. Okay, it's not going to be capped at like the $3,000, 3,500 that they said, but it's still twice as much as last year, and it's still twice as much that we're going to be paying this year. So it's not. I don't see it as a bonus. I don't see it as helping us at all.
Yeah, lots of people pointing out that it's still going up. So we have to make that absolutely clear. It's not a drop. It's just a freeze on the unit price, and an average bill will be around 2,500, no more than that. Can you pay your bill now?
But the food bank or at home, personally?
Well, but the one at home.
The one at home, okay. So I actually applied for a British Gas grant for some help because we were in debt with our gas and electric. And I had that many debt letters sent to me and threats from bailiffs coming round that I actually had to borrow money from my mum to pay the debt off, because I was terrified that the company were going to come round and basically cut us off or send debt collectors. And about a week or two after I actually paid the bill off, I got a letter from the British Gas Trust Fund saying, we can't help you because you are not in debt. So
that sounds very stressful, and
incredibly stressful. It was incredibly stressful, and it just felt like a massive kick in the teeth, because I'd applied to them sort of 3 months beforehand and was asking for help, and no one was helping, even though the government was saying, we've got all this help put in place for you, and the gas companies are going to help you out. It's incredibly stressful.
I know you've had a real run of bad luck, haven't you, because your husband had a well-paid job, but you had developed mental health problems during the pandemic, so he can no longer work, and I'm sorry to hear he's very poorly as well. And I guess what you're going through, you see in the food bank you volunteer at as well.
I do, and just to sort of piggyback onto that, you're actually phoning me, and I'm in hospital. It's okay. I've been okay with the nurses. I'm actually on a cardiac ward. I'm in heart failure. So from a personal point of view, when winter comes, it's even more stress for us to worry about, because I'm going to need my heating on. I can't be sat there in the cold. There's just no way on earth that I can do that. From the food bank point of view.
I just wanted to say I'm very, very sorry to hear that. Do you think what's going on with your health has been linked in some way to all of the stress that you've been under because of all of this?
A lot of it is caused by COVID. Obviously, the stress isn't helping at all. I've got to try and be as stress-free as possible. And the thought of when I get out of hospital and go home, I'm going to have the heating on. I'm going to have to think about paying bills. I'm going to have to think about paying gas companies and electricity companies. Is incredibly, incredibly stressful. And I'm actually on a 24-hour monitor. My monitor's just been beeping because my heart rate was going up at the thought of it. So yeah, it's incredibly stressful.
What could change things for you then? What do you want to hear? Because this may not be the end of it. This may just be the start of it. If the government could do more for people like you, Tracy, what would you say to them?
I'd ask them and plead with them and beg them to tax the big companies, tax the gas and the electric companies who are making billions in profit. Billions, yet the cost for us everyday folk is still rising. Tax them and lower the cap even more. Take it back to what it was last year. You know, the gas and electric companies have got so much money coming into them. They are making huge profits. They can afford to not rip us off and not charge us over the odds.
Tracy, thank you so much for talking to us, especially from your hospital bed. We wish you all the best with your recovery. Thank you so much.
Very welcome. Thank you so much.
Tracy Gibson then, a food bank worker from Derby, reacting to the price cap freeze on electricity bills. She says it will make no difference to her. It's still a rise. What are your views? Do get in touch with the programme, 85058.
Yes, on that very note, we've got some experts coming on in the next hour of the programme. So if you have got a specific question, I'm sure they'll be able to help you best they can, 85058.
Five Live Drive.
Claire McDonnell and Tony Livesey.
And here are the headlines at 5 o'clock. The Queen is under medical supervision with doctors concerned for her health. Buckingham Palace issued a statement earlier saying she remains comfortable at Balmoral. Prince Charles, the Princess Royal, the Duke of York and the Earl of Wessex have travelled to the estate in Aberdeenshire to be with her. Prince William and Harry are also on their way. Our royal correspondent Johnny Diamond told Drive there is growing concern.
Until today, there was no real indication that there was anything particular wrong apart from those mobility problems. Now we do have a very clear sign that something is wrong and that it is probably quite serious because of the fact that the family is gathering round.
Political leaders have sent messages of goodwill. Liz Truss says the thoughts of people across the UK will be with the monarch and her family. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says he's deeply worried. Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, says people are feeling profoundly concerned, and the Welsh First Minister, Mark Drakeford, has sent his best wishes. These people have gathered outside the gates at Balmoral.
She's a fantastic queen and she's where she loves to be. That's the most important thing, I think. I hope everything's okay.
We thought as a matter of respect, we would just come up to the gates of the castle. She's a person who's been of considerable integrity and a great person for the country over so many years.
In other news, Liz Truss has announced a package to help protect people and businesses from surging energy prices. The plan will limit the average annual household gas and electricity bill to £2,500 from October. Our personal finance correspondent is Kevin Peachy.
Clearly, if you live in a big drafty house, then you could have a bill that's higher than that. And if you live in a small, well-insulated flat, then you'll be paying less. Remember, that typical household was paying about £1,277 a year last winter, and now paying about £2,000 a year, but was expecting for that bill to go up to about £3,500.
The scheme will be funded by government borrowing. Labour says the money should come from a windfall tax on oil and gas companies. Police investigating the fatal shooting of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool have arrested another suspect. A 29-year-old man is being questioned on suspicion of assisting an offender. 4 other men who were arrested have been released on bail. And the summer was the hottest on record in Europe. That's according to EU data. A series of extreme heat waves and a long-running drought saw June, July and August shatter previous temperatures. Let's get the sports headlines now. Here's Jonathan McKeith.
Chelsea owner Todd Bowley has described Graham Potter as a proven coach and an innovator in the Premier League. The Englishman is the club's new manager after leaving Brighton. He's signed a 5-year deal at Stamford Bridge. And play at the Oval has been abandoned without a ball being bowled on day 1 of the deciding test between England and South Africa. Rain has been falling pretty much all day in southwest London. The series is level at 1-1.
In the latest travel news, in Perth on the M90, there's queuing traffic in both directions at junction 12. That's at the Broxton roundabout because of flooding. Congestion is back to junction 10 if you're heading north and south. Traffic is tailing back onto the A9 just after the Invalmond roundabout. Also, there's buses running instead of trains on ScotRail on some routes because of that flooding in Perth, so worth checking before you travel. There might be some longer journey times there. Back on the roads in West Yorkshire on the M62 eastbound, 2 lanes are closed before junction 28 for Tingley. That's because of an accident and traffic is looking pretty heavy there. In Bedfordshire on the M1 southbound, there's 2 lanes closed after junction 11A for Dunstable. That's because of a vehicle fire. Traffic is passing, but it's looking slow. Congestion at the moment is back to junction 12 for Flitwick. On the M25 anti-clockwise, 1 lane is closed from junction 12 to 11 for Chertsey because of an accident. There's congestion to junction 13 for Staines and back onto the M3 towards junction 3, and that's just traffic trying to join the M25 there. And on the M27 eastbound, 3 lanes are closed from junction 8 for Hamble to junction 9 because of an accident. There's congestion back to junction 5 and you're looking at delays of an hour and 15 minutes. Ellie Brennan, 5 Live Travel.
5 Live Drive. Tony Livesey and Claire McDonnell.
Yes, thank you for being with us this afternoon on Drive. Much of our focus, as you will imagine, are on concerns around the health of the Queen, and we'll return to that story in just a second. But I just want to point out that in this section of the programme, before 5:30, we're going to speak to the Director of Operations of Energy Support and Advice, and also a consumer champion too, who hopefully might be able to answer any questions you have about what Liz Truss announced today as far as energy savings were concerned, or help for domestic and business users as well. So if you've got any particular questions, excuse me, do get those into us, 85058 at BBC 5 Live. It is 5:05 on Drive with Tony and Claire. To our main story then. And members of the royal family are gathering at Balmoral this afternoon after it was announced that the Queen's been put under medical supervision because of concerns about her health. Palace doctors, in the statement released earlier today, say the Queen remains comfortable. Prince William, Prince Edward, Prince Andrew landed in Aberdeen a short time ago. Prince Charles, Princess Anne and Harry are also gathering at Balmoral. Our royal correspondent Lorna Gordon is at Balmoral with the latest. We can hear quite a bit of noise there, Lorna. I gather, I've got TV pictures in front of me here, pretty similar to Buckingham Palace. Crowds are beginning to gather at the gates.
Some crowds, more media. The motorcade is just arriving there this moment. We are seeing Range Rovers, 2 Range Rovers entering the main gates of the Balmoral estate with the members of the royal family, and there a 3rd car of that entourage, a 4th car passing by just now of that entourage that has travelled from Aberdeen Airport, that plane arriving there from Northolt just a little over an hour ago. It's about 40 miles away, and that is quite a fast journey they've made to Balmoral today. It's a slow road, it's a windy road, and the weather is extremely bad here in the north of Scotland. But yes, more members of the royal family have just arrived.
Well, I think we could tell from the off there that we're having problems with Lorna's line. I don't think we're going to get her back in the immediate future now, so that's we'll try later on in the programme. That was Lorna Gordon from Balmoral.
Yes, and she's right. We just saw the pictures of those that kind of royal motorcade sweeping into the gates of Balmoral, going quite fast actually. So we can assume that the royals that landed at Aberdeen Airport are now arriving at Balmoral, as we've seen them in the pictures there. Let's talk to Helena Wilkinson, our royal correspondent, who's at Windsor for us. Helena, I know people are gathering at various royal palaces. What has been the reaction where you are?
Well, this is, of course, a royal town, the castle, Windsor Castle, which is right in the centre of the town. This is where the Queen spent the last 2.5 years since the first lockdown of the COVID pandemic. It's where she spent the last months of the Duke of Edinburgh's life. They spent that here together, and it is one of her favoured residences, Windsor Castle. Here, the reaction, of course, it's a tourist attraction as well, and many tourists emerging out of the gates of the castle in front of us. Some aware of the news about the Queen's health, others hadn't been aware, but we spoke also to some people in the town centre itself. many emotional upon hearing the news about the Queen's health. Some people, of course, have met the Queen, and in terms of the locals here, the residents, they very much see the Queen as a local, as a neighbour. In the past, they have seen her out and about in the Great Park, which is just next to the castle. So there is a great deal of concern for the Queen's health. We know that the Duke of Cambridge has travelled to Balmoral. He's one of the members of the immediate family who have gone to see the Queen. He and his wife, the Duchess of Cambridge, they very recently moved here to Windsor, about a mile away from the castle. We understand that the Duchess of Cambridge has in fact stayed behind here, so she has not travelled to Balmoral as far as we understand. We know that their 3 children had their first full day at a school in Berkshire, and so one would expect that is probably the reason why the Duchess of Cambridge has not gone with her husband. But yes, a great deal of concern for the Queen, and everyone here just waiting to hear further news about how she is.
We have heard, as Tony was saying not that long ago, that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have cancelled their visit to the Well Child Awards ceremony this evening. Meghan Markle remains in London, Prince Harry on his way to Balmoral as well. So when do we think, Helena, we can expect more information? It really is a waiting game at the moment, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Waiting to see whether the palace will release any updates. I think we've seen in the past, haven't we, that Buckingham Palace never really give a running commentary when it comes to the Queen's health. They only give updates if they are significant updates. And so that is why this statement that was released by the palace just after 12:30 this afternoon is concerning. And if you add together the fact that very quickly we saw members of the royal family beginning to make that journey to Balmoral, where the Queen is said to be comfortable. That was what was in the statement from the palace this afternoon. She is under medical supervision but is comfortable. I think, given the fact that members of her family are travelling with her, that the palace and the wording, the phrasing of that statement, which was released by Buckingham Palace earlier, I think that gives an indication of the concern about the Queen's health. But in terms of when we're going to hear another statement, an update, it's just waiting from now on.
Helena, thank you so much for joining us. Our royal correspondent Helena Wilkinson joining us live from Windsor. Just to say, in the last few moments, the White House has said US President Joe Biden's thoughts are with the Queen and her family. That statement from the President in the last few moments.
Let's speak now to Catherine Pepinster, who's a royal expert and author of the book Defenders of the Faith. Catherine, specifically, your focus is about the Queen's relationship with her faith. Hello, by the way, welcome to the programme.
Hello there, good afternoon.
She will be getting a lot of comfort at the moment from her long-held and deep beliefs. Explain to us the significance of that and the Queen's relationship with her faith, and how perhaps she's illustrated that over the decades.
I think one of the most significant things she ever said was in 1947, when she was 21, before she even become Queen, when she pledged that her life would be spent in service to God and to the people. And she finished that statement, that promise that she would do this, whether her life be short or long, by saying, "God, make good my vow." That's how seriously she took that. And of course, then that seriousness of purpose, that vow was repeated at her coronation some years later in 1953, where again she vowed to serve. And she has this very, very strong religious belief. She sees herself, I think, as somebody who serves. You know, she might be Queen, she might be head of state, but she serves. And I think that must have been throughout her life a comfort, really, that she was. She had God there. She had God to assist her. She could pray to God for help, and she on many occasions has asked people for their prayers as well. So I think it really does matter. When she was preparing for her coronation in 1953, then Archbishop of Canterbury, Geoffrey Fisher, gave her a book of prayers as preparation for her for that momentous occasion in her life. And she's kept that book ever since. It's one of her most treasured possessions. So I think that indicates, how important her faith is. And we hear some of that each year at Christmas when she gives her Christmas message.
Well, yes, interesting you say that, Catherine, because I'm struck by something she said in 2002, because this is by way of illustrating how she's made clear her faith to all of us over the years. So during her Christmas message in 2002, she said this: "I know just how much I rely on my faith to guide me through the good times and the bad. Each day is a new beginning. I know that the only way to live my life is to try to do what is right, to take the long view, to give of my best in all that the day brings, and to put my trust in God. I draw strength from the message of hope in the Christian gospel." I suppose there's, Catherine, as well as an indication of the Queen's personal faith, there's no underestimating there the uplift it will give to those in this country within their own religious beliefs. It will bolster theirs, and you would maybe have thought maybe even have brought people to church.
Well, an irony is that in her time, in her reign as Queen, in fact, religious adherence has somewhat declined. But I think that's made her more important. If a lot of people no longer go to church, even on, say, Christmas Day, the bit of religion they get on Christmas Day comes from the Queen. And the other thing that's very interesting about her, I think, is that she's always been somebody who, although she is Supreme Governor of the Church of England, she's an Anglican herself, she's always been quite broad-minded about religion. And in her Christmas message in 1952, as she was preparing for her coronation in June 1953, she asked people of all faiths, she said in that message, to pray for her. I think for somebody in 1952, that was probably quite a progressive point of view. That's because she'd already started travelling in the Commonwealth. She'd met many people of other faiths. And of course, as we've become a more diverse country, she has continued to meet people of other faiths in this nation as well.
Yeah, it's certainly been notable today, as we've already read out on this show, various statements from various politicians about her, but also leaders of all religions within the UK have wished her well as well, which is interesting. Catherine, what about the wider royal family and religion? Can we specify their relationship? Has the Queen been able to pass on her level of belief to her children, for example?
Well, I think one thing that's very interesting is that she shared her religious beliefs with her husband, the late Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. But I think it's fair to say that that's a more intellectual kind of curiosity about them. And I think that's something that Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales, has inherited from his father. So there is a kind of curiosity there, and the Prince of Wales has been known for being very interested in Islam, for example. But I think as time has worn on, he's shown perhaps a greater degree of interest in Christianity itself, and he's, for example, sometimes given thought for the day on your sister station, BBC Radio 4. And he's spoken about Christianity in such a way that it indicates he does have a very strong belief himself. I don't think it's that faith is quite so overtly expressed by other members of the royal family, although, of course, we see them all attending church at Christmas and Easter, etc. Yeah. But I'm not sure it's quite on the level of their mother.
Catherine, fascinating talking to you. Thanks very much for coming on the programme today. Catherine Pepinster there, author of the book Defenders of the Faith. And bearing in mind the situation as we know it at the moment, as the royal family are gathering around the Queen at Balmoral, I think that quote from her Christmas message in 2002 bears repetition just for now. She said in that speech, "I know just how much I rely on my faith to guide me through the good times and the bad. Each day is a new beginning. I know that the only way to live my life is to try to do what is right, to take the long view, and to give of my best in all that the day brings." That was the Queen's Christmas message in 2002. You're listening to Drive on 5 Live with Tony and Claire.
And the BBC is now reporting that all of the Queen's children are now with her at Balmoral. The Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, is currently making his way to Balmoral. So that has been confirmed by the BBC. So more from Balmoral shortly. Also, another extremely important story for everyone listening. We're going to be trying to answer your questions about energy bills throughout the programme. We have a panel standing by. We're going to go to them next. So whatever questions you have, just do get in touch. You can text us 85058. WhatsApp us as well, 08085 909 693. You can send us a voice note on that number as well. We're going to do that next. And of course, we will keep you fully updated on what's happening at Balmoral and any updates, of course, on the health condition of the Queen.
5 Live Drive.
Claire McDonnell and Tony Livesey.
Now, there has been some major support announced for people struggling to pay their energy bills today. The new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, put forward a plan to freeze household energy bills.
This guarantee, which includes a temporary suspension of green levies, means that from the 1st of October, a typical household will pay no more than £2,500 per year for each of the next 2 years while we get the energy market back on track.
Well, the Prime Minister also announced help for businesses with a price cap coming in for them too. But while households will be protected for 2 years, the cap for businesses will only apply for 6 months.
And the help will be for everyone in England, Scotland and Wales, with equivalent assistance for Northern Ireland. And as always with this, the devil is in the detail. We've had plenty of questions from you, the 5 Live listeners. Also, let's not forget, even with this cap, bills will still be 3 times bigger than they were a year ago. So it's a cap, but it's still a rise. So what happens if you still can't pay? So here to help us with all these questions are our energy experts. Ian Thompson is the Director of Operations of Energy Support and Advice UK. It's a Facebook community with more than 85,000 members now. Afternoon, Ian.
Good afternoon.
And Jane Hawkes is a consumer champion. Hi, Jane.
Hi, good afternoon.
Can we start then, Ian, this one to you. Lots of people saying we're hearing the word average, the average bill. But does this all come down to the unit charge? And if it does, what is that? Can you talk us through? Because people obviously want to know, well, what does that mean I'm going to pay? So what have we learnt today about all of that?
Well, that's right. The biggest question on everybody's lips is how that affects them. You know, the unit rates are very important. The unit rates are standard charge for each gas and electricity. They're the rates that they can then compare with their own current tariffs, and then they can make some calculations about what they're going to pay themselves. We don't, unfortunately, have any information of what those unit charges are going to be. As you already mentioned, the devil's in the detail. We know that there's going to be a £2,500 cap on the average usage, which is based on 12,000 kilowatt hours of gas usage a year and 2,900 kilowatt hours of electricity usage each year. And it's really important to remember, if you use more than that, you will pay more than £2,500. Unfortunately, if you use less than that, you will pay less than £2,500. So it's absolutely critical that we still look at making economies, and we try and cut back where at all possible.
It's interesting because Martin Lewis, actually, if you go and find him on social media, of course, a consumer champion, he's actually done a 15-point quick need to knows for consumers. So that's a really kind of concise summary of what it actually means, of the information that we have now. And he makes the very important point, Ian, that essentially it's an average. They're giving you an average, but if you use more, you will still pay more, won't you?
That's right, you absolutely will. If you continue to use more than this average figure, then your bills will ultimately more than this £2,500 that's been announced. And it's really important that we're clear what that is. Now, as soon as we have that data that broken down, more than likely from Ofgem, we will be able to calculate fairly quickly what those unit rates are going to mean for people. And once we have that, we'll put that out in the public domain through our group, and it's always available for everybody. I'm sure Martin Lewis will be doing the same sort of thing.
Yeah, he will. Jane, listen, just a quick word to you before we go to 5 Live listeners, and they've got lots of questions, but essentially people kind of are incredibly worried about this, aren't they? And we have to emphasise it's still a rise for a lot of people, isn't it, this?
Exactly. The announcement to the freezing of bills, it's no doubt a welcome relief for many households across the country who are just becoming increasingly anxious and worried about soaring energy bills with no sign of abatement. However, even with these new support package, a significant number will struggle to cover their heating bills this winter. We're looking at a quarter of homes, around 25%, will still be in fuel poverty after the government handouts and the new cap, and a reported 6 million households are already 1.3 billion in debt on energy bills, despite the warm summer that we've just had. So it's not the time for us to take our foot off the gas as consumers, so to speak. We need to be remembering the tips and tricks that we've learned to reduce, monitor and understand our energy consumption throughout the last few months, years.
Well, listen, guys, Ian and Jane, we've got plenty of questions from our listeners. And just a reminder, if you want to get a quick question in now, feel free, 85058 at BBC5 Live. When we get to the questions, Ian and Jane, just jump in and answer the ones that are applicable to you. Let's just first of all welcome Veronica to the programme from Norwich. Hello, Veronica.
Hi, thank you.
Hi. So look, just I know from your notes, Veronica, as a shorthand intro here, you rent your property and you only use electricity. So what is your current situation?
So right now, I live here by myself and I'm on a very good income, but because I'm single, I'm paying for absolutely everything. I don't have really any luxuries other than paying for Netflix, and I am still at the point when my tariff is due to be renewed in February that I'm being informed that I'm going to have to be paying nearly £300 or more a month, and I'm paying $150 right now. That extra $150 a month is going to be taken away from my food money. So what is your advice for single people that are on good incomes that are not eligible for all these extra benefits?
Well, look, before we get to how we can help you, Veronica, let's just clarify, Ian or Jane, I don't know which one wants to take this, but would the cap prevent that rise to £300 a month for Veronica?
Well, I'll jump in here. That cap won't necessarily prevent that rise. What Veronica would be best advice for her to do is to look at what your actual usage is. I suspect one of the things that your supplier has done is given you a look at saying we're going to raise your direct debit to £300. That would be based on probably the unit rates that were predicted to be in force after the October price rise. And I think that it maybe will be based on last year's consumption, which now I'm sure you've made lots of efforts to make, lots of reductions, maybe significantly less. So I would advise you work with your supplier to look at your actual consumption, and hopefully we can make sure that that's significantly less, going from 150 to 300. It would of course depend on your current tariff, what that is showing, and obviously that would be into the new tariff or the new unit rates with this price cap. But it's traditional generally for electric-only houses to use a little more energy, quite a bit more energy in that respect. But it certainly means that if you were to continue to use more, it could be over that £2,500, which is of course reflected with that £300 a month. But as I say, I think you may find hopefully it will be considerably less.
Right, we've got loads of questions to get through from other listeners, but just okay. Veronica, on that, just to answer Ian, how capable are you of cutting down your electricity usage?
So I put my electric heater on for 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour at lunchtime, and 1 hour late afternoon. Last year I did that through the winter, and I have a laptop running because I work from home. What do I turn off? Literally, what do I turn on? My plan this winter season is I'm not putting it on at lunchtime. It's going to be an hour in the morning and an hour in the late afternoon, and then blankets and hot water bottles. It's no way to live. It's really a sad situation for millions of us living like this, and I have no way to cut it down.
No.
Have you downloaded, Veronica, any energy monitoring apps with such as Energy Cost Calculator to get an overview of your usage? I mean, do you know what each device actually is using? Because that's really useful to be able to work out what you can actually switch off without cutting everything off. As you said, there's only so far you can go. So I do get
Indeed.
Correct. it's the electric heaters, unfortunately, that I have in the home. That is what is the most difficult for me. And that is the same with a lot of renters, because landlords don't want to have gas in the house. They want everything to be completely electric. So the electric heaters are the most expensive to heat your home. So that's the difficulty I face.
Veronica, we wish you well. Thank you very much for telling us your story. I suspect you're not alone, but thank you. Veronica from Norwich.
Loads and loads of questions coming in on the text. Alison's in Suffolk. Afternoon, Alison. She says, and this is echoing quite a few people, says, energy crisis, any help for the 1.5 million people in rural communities who have oil heating? It's gone up 130%, and it's still rising. The question was asked in PMQs yesterday, but can't see it in any of the news. Ian, is there any news on that? There was news of a fund, wasn't there, for alternative heating sources?
You're absolutely right. So we know many, particularly in rural communities, rely on heating oil and LPG, this liquid petroleum gas. And as I understand it, there'll be a discretionary payment to help those people. And yet, unfortunately, there aren't any major details about that. But it's certainly been announced that it has been considered there will be a fund. I don't know at this stage how you will apply for that. But previously, they haven't been considered at all, and now they have.
Okay. Helen in Basingstoke has this one. If we are, and this has actually come up a lot over the last 48 hours, if we're on a fixed deal with our energy provider, is there any consumer support for early exit of these contracts if the standard variable rate is cheaper? This is people who fix thinking that it would make them, better off, and now it maybe doesn't. So where does that leave them? Jane, do you want to take that one?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, well, if you're within the 14 days of entering into that contract, then you have the 14-day cooling off period where you can exit without penalty. I think it's important that we may as well emphasise the fact that if you don't ask, you don't get anyway. So if you do want to leave your contract because the option that's come into play now is better, then speak to your provider and try to negotiate in that respect. However, analyse your exit fees, because it could well be that the exit fee is quite minimal in comparison to what you'll be spending on increased costs by staying on the tariff that you have just signed up for. So I think that's quite, it's a frequent question today. I hope that I've been able to answer that for you.
Yeah, no, you have. And I also heard Martin Lewis earlier saying that he was going to carry on lobbying government to say, people should not be out of pocket, the people who fixed. So I think there is some talk of maybe some movement on rebates in those situations. So we'll have to wait and see more detail on the way we think.
We have heard from a few suppliers who have sent essentially, those on fixed tariffs can perhaps either stay on them and move to the new price cap tariffs, and they will waive exit fees or penalties. But absolutely contact your supplier right away.
Just by way of signposting people listening and frantically texting us because we're getting so many questions, Jane and Ian are going to return before 6 o'clock as well. So do keep your questions coming in. We'll try and fire through some more ahead of the news. So this one, guys, is from Tony in Birmingham, and it's kind of a when is a cap and not a cap. I'm slightly confused, he says. Can I max out my heating usage, turn on all my lights, run a hot tub, and only pay a maximum of £2,500 a year? Or is the cap set to £2,500, but in theory I could pay more?
In theory,
it's a really poor. Sorry. Yeah,
no,
you will absolutely pay more. Unfortunately, it's a kind of really badly described situation, a price cap. It isn't actually capping the price you will pay. What it's capping is the unit rates and standing charges. But ultimately, if you use more, you will pay more. If you use less, you will pay less.
Right. So So it isn't a limit. You can't run a lighthouse and then expect to get a bill of £2,500. So just explain, Ian, the specifics of that cap then.
Okay, so it's based on what's considered to be the average usage throughout Great Britain. But, it's difficult for people to understand that. But the figure that's put on it is it's based on an annual usage of 12,000 units of gas, kilowatt hours of gas, and 2,900 kilowatt hours of electricity annually. If you were to hit those actual figures, you would in theory, you would pay £2,500.
Right.
If you're going to go over that, you're going to pay more. And if you're using less than that, you're going to use less.
So it's very important to know that you've still got to cut down your usage as best you can.
It's absolutely critical, yes.
Yeah, Jane, I guess you'll be helpful on when we come back talking about tips for people to do that. But it's very difficult, as we heard from Veronica there, if your choice is to put the heating on for 2 or 3 hours a day.
Yeah, very difficult choices for people, which in the 21st century, is very disappointing, and it shouldn't even be happening anyway. And as we discussed at the start of the show here, this is a continuing situation that's going to worsen for a lot of people. So even though it's good news and a bit of a relief for now, that we still have major issues and hurdles that we need to overcome.
And just another one, a quick one to squeeze in before the news headlines. Lots of people getting in touch. We've already covered oil, but different ways of powering their heating. This texter says, what about help for people who did the right thing and started the decarbonisation journey, moving to biomass boilers? Cost of pellets has already gone up by nearly 100%. Our gas equivalent will already be £3,000 to £4,000 a year. Prices increase because pellets come from the region impacted by Ukraine. Can't change the boiler out with boiler upgrade scheme for air source, and that's only designed to replace gas. So people with biomass, for example, do you know anything about that, Ian?
Yeah, it's essentially what's considered a solid fuel. She's absolutely right what she says. All the fuel options are rising. And as we understand it, that's going to be covered by the same scheme for heating oil and LPG. So there will be a discretionary payments to help those. Unfortunately, as I'm always saying at the moment, details to follow.
Listen, you're not going anywhere. Thank you so much for your expertise. Keep your questions coming in to Ian and Jane. They're going to be with us for the next half hour. You can text us 85058. You can also get in touch on this number. Send us a voice note, 08085 909 693 as well. Whatever your questions are. And goodness, Tony, look at how many are coming in. It's a very, very important issue. We will try and get as many of your questions answered as possible. But time is 25 minutes to 6 now. Let's get the news headlines.
Listen on BBC Sounds. This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
The royal family are gathering at Balmoral after the Queen's doctors said they were concerned for her health. Buckingham Palace says the Queen, who's 96, is comfortable. The Prince of Wales and the Princess Royal have arrived at the estate, while Princes William and Harry are on their way. The Prime Minister Liz Truss says she's deeply concerned about the news, while the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says he's hoping for her recovery. Elsewhere today, the Prime Minister's outlined her plans to help protect homes and businesses from surging energy costs. The average annual household gas and electricity bill will be capped at £2,500 for 2 years. And a further arrest has been made by detectives investigating the murder of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell. A 29-year-old man is being questioned on suspicion of assisting an offender. Those are the news headlines for now. Let's get the sport. Here's Jonathan McKeith.
Tony, thank you. Let's head to New York and the US Open. We have British interests in both men's doubles semi-finals. Watching will be our tennis correspondent, Russell Fuller.
And first up are the defending champions Joe Salisbury and Rajiv Ram against the Colombian 13th seeds, Juan Sebastian Cabal and Robert Farah. The rain has cleared, blue skies overhead the Billie Jean King National Tennis Centre, and no break points so far. It's 3 games all in the first set, with Neil Skupski and Wesley Koolhof, the winner of 6 titles on tour this year, to follow against Marcelo Arevalo and Jean-Julien Rocher. The women's semi-finals start at midnight. They feature the world number 1 Iga Swiatek against Aryna Sabalenka. And the first match on the schedule is the Wimbledon runner-up Ons Jabeur against Caroline Garcia of France.
There's commentary right now over on Sports Extra. Graham Potter says he's proud and excited to represent Chelsea as their new head coach after agreeing to a 5-year contract at the club. Potter's move to Stamford Bridge was announced earlier this afternoon after Thomas Tuchel was sacked yesterday following 100 games in charge. The former Brighton manager will be on the sidelines for the early kick-off on Saturday when Chelsea travel to London rivals Fulham. Speaking last weekend on Football Focus, the former Premier League centre-back Ashley Williams said he believed Potter has the potential to do great things at Chelsea.
Graham Potter is so intelligent as a manager. He creates overloads and little puzzles for the other team to try and solve around the pitch, and he seems to do it, every single week. He creates problems for the team, different problems with whoever's playing, like you're saying. Whichever players he puts on the pitch, they seem to figure it out. I think he coaches, intelligence into his players.
On the pitch, both the Europa League and the Europa Conference League get underway shortly, with plenty of British involvement this evening. Hearts begin their Conference League campaign shortly at home to Istanbul Başakşehir, while later this evening West Ham welcome Romanian side FCSB to the London Stadium for their first group game. Elsewhere in the Europa League, Arsenal are away to FC Zurich, with kick-off getting underway at 5:45, so just a few minutes' time, while Manchester United will play Real Sociedad from 8 o'clock. That's at Old Trafford. In transfer news, Manchester City women have signed Japan international Yui Hasegawa on a 3-year deal from West Ham. The deadline day move comes after Kira Walsh moved from City to Barcelona yesterday for a world record fee in the region of £400,000. To cricket, we would hope to go to cricket, but the rain has played a part all day. It meant no play was possible on day one of the deciding test. Conditions have also affected things at the PGA Championship. Our golf correspondent Ian Carter is at Wentworth.
Yes, but they've managed to play through some very heavy rain today. They are picking and placing the ball, and there has been a lot of casual water on the course as well. But play has continued uninterrupted and left an English-dominated leaderboard, with Tommy Fleetwood playing for the first time in 6 weeks at the top of the leaderboard after a round of 64, 8 under par. He's been joined by fellow Englishman Andy Sullivan there, a shot ahead of Matthew Jordan from near Southport from Merseyside, and Shane Lowry at 6 under par, 2 shots off the lead. It was a 68 today for Rory McIlroy at 4 under. He's 4 shots behind.
Ian, for now, thank you. And a quick correction from earlier, there is no tennis over on Sports Extra. I jumped the gun thinking the cricket, because the cricket ended, there was tennis on Sports Extra, but that is not the case. For now, though, that's your latest from BBC Sport.
In the latest travel news, in Perth on the M90, there's queuing traffic in both directions at junction 12. That's in the Broxton roundabout because of flooding, and now a bit of gravel on the road as well because of that flooding. There's congestion at junction 10 if you're heading north, and southbound traffic is tailing back onto the A9 just after the Inverelmond roundabout. Also, because of that flooding, there's buses running instead of some trains on ScotRail on some routes going through Perth, so just check before you travel there. Back on the roads on the M1 northbound, there's queuing traffic between junction 29 for Chesterfield and 29A. That's because of an accident, and congestion is back to junction 28. You're looking at delays of 25 minutes. In Bedfordshire on the M1 southbound, the entry slip road is partially blocked at junction 11A for Dunstable. That's because of an earlier vehicle fire. Traffic is passing okay, but it's slow, and congestion is back to junction 12 to Flitwick, and there's also some slow traffic northbound because of onlookers there. On the M25 anti-clockwise, one lane is closed from junction 12 to 11. That's because of an accident. Congestion is back to junction 14 for Heathrow Terminal 4. It's also slow on the M3 back to junction 3 as people are trying to get onto the M25 there. And on the M27 eastbound, long delays. There's 3 lanes closed from junction 8 for Hamble to junction 9 because of an accident. Congestion is back to junction 5. There's also queues through Hedge-End, Bilserdon, Notley and Swathling. That's because people are trying to avoid the motorway. You're looking at delays of 50 minutes to an hour. Ellie Brennan at 5 Live Travel.
5 Live Drive.
Claire McDonnell and Tony Livesey.
Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon here on 5 Live. Our main story today, the Queen is under medical supervision at Balmoral after her doctors said they were concerned about her health. They say the 96-year-old monarch remains comfortable. Her children have now gathered at Balmoral. Our royal correspondent Johnny Diamond gave us this update a little earlier.
The news started to come out of the palace, announcements from the palace that other members of the royal family were making their way to Balmoral, where the Queen is. First that the Prince of Wales was going there, then that the Duke of Cambridge, the second in line to the throne, and then gradually the word came out that all of the Queen's children and some of her grandchildren were either at Balmoral or making their way there. And those 3 things, the statement, the content of the statement itself, and the fact that so many members of the royal family are making their way towards Balmoral, a clear indication of some seriousness of the situation. It's worth saying we have heard nothing from the palace since then.
Well, the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, who was, of course, at Balmoral just this week, says the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news from Buckingham Palace. Sir Keir Starmer says he's deeply worried and he joined everyone across the United Kingdom in hoping for her recovery.
We've already talked about the Queen's relationship with the Commonwealth, but she's, of course, a patron for many charities as well, including the Aberdeen Association of Social Service, a charity that's had royal support since Queen Victoria. And Jennifer Mitchell is from the charity. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello, how are you?
Good. I wish we were talking in better circumstances, but it's a nice time to reflect on the devotion that the Queen has shown throughout her life for her charity work, a devotion that, you can see from her level of activity is absolutely 100% genuine, and you will have first-hand experience of this. So explain the Queen's relationship with your charity.
Yes, so as you mentioned, we've been very grateful to have royal patronage since Queen Victorian days, and every reigning monarch has been patron of BSA since that moment in time. Her Majesty the Queen, I think it's fair to say, leads a life of service and selfless dedication, and across the years she's taken a very keen interest in the work that we do locally here in the northeast of Scotland, and has made a significant contribution to us in helping to change the lives of vulnerable children and adults across the decades.
Through your work, you've met her on a number of occasions. What were those experiences like?
Yes, she is an incredibly kind individual with a witty sense of humour. I've had the personal privilege of meeting Her Majesty as recently as 2019 at our garden party at Holyrood Palace. We hold an excellent working relationship with Balmoral Castle and Estate, and most recently Her Majesty granted us permission to hold our anniversary event at Balmoral, and we are profoundly thankful for her support.
Illustrating her sense of humour, she had a word of warning for you, didn't she, at the time?
She very much did so, yes. So when we were seeking to gain permission to hold a special event at Balmoral, when she was up for a private visit the May that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex were getting married, she graciously granted her permission, but followed it quickly up by, are they off their heads? Do they not know how cold it is in November?
Yeah. At the same time, we've got to acknowledge it's absolutely her favourite place, isn't it, in the UK? She loves Balmoral, whatever the weather, I guess. Jennifer, what sort of weight does the Queen's patronage give to a charity like yours?
I think it's a tremendous honour to know that the reigning monarch has a deep interest in the work that we particularly do. That patronage does carry a lot of weight to it, particularly when we're speaking to supporters, to individuals that use our services. We're incredibly honoured to be one of, I think, the only charity that's received the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service twice, and it does hold a weight. And I think in terms of our location in Scotland, being so close to Royal Deeside, the Royals are thought of very fondly up here, and ultimately we look very fondly on the Royals, particularly as an organisation. We very much view Her Majesty the Queen as a beacon of light in some of our country's darkest moments.
Jennifer, as I said, I wish the circumstances were different, but thank you very much for being with us this afternoon.
No, thank you very much, and our thoughts and prayers are with Her Majesty and all our family this evening.
Thank you. Jennifer Mitchell from the charity, the Aberdeen Association of Social Service.
And just to remind you what we've seen in the last 40 minutes or so, Prince William arrived a short time ago with his uncles Prince Andrew and Prince Edward, and Prince Edward's wife Sophie. Prince William was driving a Range Rover as it swept through the gates of Balmoral Castle. Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge, has remained at Windsor with their children, and Prince Harry is on his way separately but not accompanied by his wife Meghan. That's according to their spokesperson. So, of course, more information on that situation as we get it here on 5 Live Drive. We're also covering on the programme the big announcement in the Commons today where the government is planning to freeze household energy bills for 2 years. There's also some support for businesses. Let's welcome back our energy experts who've been answering your questions this afternoon. Ian Thompson is the Director of Operations at Energy Support and Advice UK. It's a Facebook community with more than 85,000 members. And Jane Hawkes is a consumer champion. Hello to both of you again.
Hello again.
There's so many texts coming in. So let's start with this one. James in Dewsbury, what does the energy cap mean to those not only on benefits but living in rented accommodation, electricity only and on prepayment meters as I am, says James. Jane, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, well, the energy cap, the energy price cap increase hits the hardest those who use prepayment meters. So 1971 current for standard, but 2017 for prepayment. These tariffs tend to be a little bit more expensive. And the number of people who've been unable to afford the top-up meters has gone there from 3,000 in February to 13,000 in July. So it's incredibly high rise there. But if you run out of electricity or gas, your supplier provides an emergency credit facility, which you can auto access from your meter. But if this isn't enough, you can call your supplier to advise them of your situation, and they are required to provide any additional support resources to keep you supplied. And Ofgem's rules do state that providers must work with you to help you from financial difficulties and come up with affordable payment plans.
Hope that helps, James.
A quick one here from Lisa, but I suspect I know the answer to this, bearing in mind what you guys said a little bit earlier. Lisa says, I live alone, I work in the NHS. I've been wondering, is it a good idea to buy an electric heater? I'd probably only use it for an hour in the morning and for another 1 or 2 hours in the evening after work. Is it a good idea? And how do I know which to buy in terms of energy usage? But Ian, I'll come to you on this. I think you both said earlier on that electric heaters take up a whopping amount of electricity.
Well, what we're going to look at here is, first of all, I would check the labelling out and the specification of the heater to look how much energy it's going to use. You're absolutely quite right. Heating with electricity, certainly in this way, can be very expensive. Although what you would tend to find is with gas, we tend to use it for central heating. So we're going to heat the entire home or segments of it, whereas a small electric heater could just heat a small part of your home, maybe a small part of a room. So it's kind of not clear cut, but certainly it's worth considering. But really need to keep an eye on the energy use of that item, which can get quite expensive.
Great. Now let's talk to Bushy from Oxfordshire. He's on the line. Hi, Bushy.
Hello there.
Okay, so you've got a whopping great energy bill for one of your businesses. Tell us more.
Well, I took this business on about 5 months ago. So we were doing work, and obviously we managed to open in the end. So finding a supplier hasn't been that easy. Obviously, with the price increase, I thought I'll just drag it along to get a better deal. As we were waiting, I got a final bill, and it's just like it was over 420% more than you were supposed to be in the end. So, yeah, a £25,000 bill we got in the end.
Good Lord. Okay. So I guess you're wondering what help there will be for you. We know that, don't we, Ian, that business is going to have a cap, but for only 6 months, and then they're going to look at it again. So what can you tell Bushy, Ian?
So what I would look at doing here is, got to play a little bit clever here. What we've got to look at for business tariffs, they tend to work somewhat different. You need to perhaps be talking to brokers to look at booking your energy purchases beyond that 6 months. So you can look at right now, and you can look at making your commitment to a supplier to make your purchases after this 6 months, where the domestic level of price cap will apply. It will still be expensive, I'm sure, but it's certainly much more likely to yield better results for you than if you left it until that 6 months was over. So for businesses, they can look at booking and buying energy in advance.
Bushy, does that sound, like the right way for you?
Well, to start with, I've got a bill of 25 grand that I've got to somehow manage to pay, and obviously we're not looking to a great future. I mean, we don't know. They did say something about a price cap. We've got no idea what that price cap is. So we don't know what the future holds, really. There's
Jane,
no light.
Do you want to come in, Jane? I thought Jane mentioned something. I thought I could hear a voice there, but maybe she's dropped off the line there. Listen, Bushy, I hope that in some way has helped. Of course, the devil will be in the detail. We haven't got a lot of that detail yet, but listen, thank you so much for getting in touch.
Thanks, Bushy. Yeah, thank you. We heard from Veronica in Norwich earlier talking about, and that got us onto the idea of electric heaters. Skip has been in touch, Ian, who says, tell Veronica to buy an oil-filled radiator, plug it in and have it on low. It's much more efficient, really good. Can you agree with that, Ian?
It's certainly a better option than some of the electric heaters. Some of the very low-cost panel heaters look very attractive. A lot of heat output from them, relatively inexpensive to buy in the first place. However, significantly more expensive to run. The oil-filled radiators, although aren't fabulous, they are certainly much more efficient to run. So, but you will pay a higher capital cost to buy one in the first place. But it's certainly not bad advice at all. But check those labels out and check the how much energy that the appliances are actually going to use.
Ian, you're holding the fort on your own at the moment. We're struggling to get Jane back, but we will endeavour to do so. This one here. What about if you're on prepayment meters for gas and electric? Are they more expensive? My supplier won't change to smart meters, says this text.
Okay, so overall they are more expensive. There's undoubtedly, but it's split. So people who are on prepay meters generally pay a slightly higher standing charge, which is the daily charge. That represents the more cost to run that payment system for the supplier. But they do tend to pay a slightly less unit rate than everybody else. It's only slightly less, but a slightly less unit rate for everybody else, and that represents that these guys are paying for their energy in advance. Overall, they can tend to be a little higher because of that standing charge, but you do actually enjoy a slightly less unit rate than everybody else because these guys are paying in advance.
Brilliant. Jane's back. Hello again, Jane.
Hello, yeah, evidently I've not been putting enough pennies in the meter, have I?
Take a look at that, Jane.
The irony of it.
Mark's in Poynton. Evening, Mark. He says this: how do I get an insulation review of my home? And once those results are in, who to go to for getting any recommended work undertaken? Are there still any grants available to help with the work, Jane?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'll have to be honest here, I don't know the answer to that. It was something I would need to look into myself. But if he wants to get in touch with me, that's fine. I'm sure you can pass on my details and we can sort that.
Okay, so listen, sorry we can't help with that at the moment, Mark, but there are more details. Yeah, check out Jane Hawkes, who's a consumer champion, and Ian Thompson as well. Thank you so much, Ian. Ian, Director of Operations of Energy Support and Advice UK. Thanks for all your questions. Obviously, it's a subject we will come back to time and time again on Drive. If we haven't answered your question today, keep in touch. We will be returning to this over the days, weeks and months to come. So we will inform you as soon as we are informed.
Now let's return to our main story this afternoon. Buckingham Palace says the Queen is under medical supervision at Balmoral Castle. Her doctors are concerned for her health, but they say in a statement that was released earlier today that the 96-year-old monarch remains comfortable. All of the Queen's children and Prince William too have now travelled to Scotland and are with her. Prince Harry is due to arrive soon. Our correspondent Helena Wilkinson is at Windsor. Helena, hello.
Hi there.
Hi. The question, I suppose it remains moot at the moment, because do you know if we're expecting a statement anytime soon from the palace?
We don't at this stage. Again, the palace have never given a running commentary when it comes to the Queen's health. They very much regard her health as a private matter, but the significance of the statement and the fact that they released that statement at just after 12:30 this afternoon, and the phrasing, the wording of it, that doctors are concerned about her, that she is under medical supervision, she is comfortable, that statement said. That was, though, a number of hours ago, and we haven't heard any updates since. So we wait and see what the palace will say next, but we haven't been given yet any indication as to when that might come.
And the added significance, Helena, today, because obviously there have been missives in the past when the Queen's not been well, but of course her family gathering at Balmoral, and we're told now all of her children are with her.
Yes, that's right. Very soon after the statement from the palace, very quickly, we heard that members of the Queen's immediate family were on their way to Balmoral, where the Queen is, to come together at what, let's not forget, is will be a difficult time for the family. So they've made their way there, and we've seen about 5:15 or so, the arrival at Balmoral of Prince William, driving a car carrying Prince Andrew, Prince Edward and Edward's wife Sophie. So they have now arrived at Balmoral. We understand that Prince Charles is there as well. The Duchess of Cambridge has remained here in Windsor. You'll know that the Cambridges recently moved here to the town. The children had their first full day at a school in Berkshire. So the Duchess of Cambridge has remained here. That is not surprising. But yes, at the moment, members of the royal family, the Queen's family, are gathering to be with her, and we all await to hear further news from the palace.
We've been watching pictures from Balmoral here all afternoon, and there's a crowd now gathering at the gates there. There's certainly a crowd gathering at Buckingham Palace. You're in Windsor. Eleanor, what is the scene there at the moment?
Well, it's pretty quiet. It had been pouring with rain throughout the afternoon here in Windsor, which I think probably put people off in terms of many people trying to find shelter. But we did speak to visitors at Windsor Castle, some emerging from the castle having heard the news about the Queen. People on the High Street, for those who don't know, the castle is in the centre of Windsor, and we spoke to people on the High Street as well, who were emotional. One of them had met the Queen before, so the feeling here is there is a great deal of concern, and for locals as well. The Queen is one of their neighbours. That's how local people see her here, and she has spent the last 2.5 years here at Windsor Castle. Since the start of the COVID pandemic, that first lockdown, this is where she has remained. This is one of her most favourite royal residences, and she spent, of course, the last months of her husband's life here at Windsor Castle. So this is a place she absolutely loves, but she, of course, travels traditionally, and she did so in July of this year to Balmoral, which is where she spends her summer, and normally she would return here to Windsor Castle in October.
Helena, thank you. Helena Wilkinson there reporting from Windsor. So the very latest news is that the Queen's 4 children are with her now at Balmoral, as is Prince William, and Prince Harry is on his way and due to arrive there very soon indeed.
Listen on BBC Sounds. This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
The latest headlines then on Drive tonight. Buckingham Palace says the Queen is under medical supervision at Balmoral after doctors became concerned for her health. All of the Queen's 4 children and Prince William are now with her. Prince Harry is on his way. In a statement, the palace says Her Majesty is comfortable. Our royal correspondent Johnny Diamond gave us this update earlier.
The news started to come out of the palace, announcements from the palace that other members of the royal family were making their way to Balmoral, where the Queen is. First, that the Prince of Wales was going there, then that the Duke of Cambridge, the second in line to the throne, and then gradually the word came out that all of the Queen's children and some of her grandchildren were either at Balmoral or making their way there. And those 3 things, the statement, the content of the statement itself, and the fact that so many members of the royal family are making their way towards Balmoral, a clear indication of some seriousness of the situation. It's worth saying we have heard nothing from the palace since then.
The Prime Minister, Liz Truss, says the thoughts of people across the UK are with the Queen and her family. The Archbishop of Canterbury is sending prayers, and the First Ministers of Scotland and Wales say the Queen is in their thoughts. Dr Ed Owens is a royal historian.
Really, she is Britain's greatest constitutional monarch. She is the purest example of the politically neutral monarch. That has been her forte, and it's meant that her reign has been uncontentious, uncontroversial, because she hasn't voiced her political opinions.
As we just discussed, well-wishers are already gathering at the gates of Balmoral as well as outside Buckingham Palace. In other news tonight, Liz Truss has announced her plan to help people with the rising cost of living. Annual household energy bills will be capped at £2,500 for 2 years. Businesses will receive similar support for 6 months. The Prime Minister says her plan is the right course of action.
Today's actions will deliver substantial benefits to our economy, boosting growth, which increases tax receipts and gives certainty to business. This intervention is expected to curb inflation by up to 5 percentage points, bringing a reduction in the cost of servicing government debt.
Liz Truss also announced the government will end the temporary ban on fracking for shale gas in England. It was introduced in 2019 after it triggered earth tremors in Lancashire. And police investigating the shooting of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell in Liverpool have arrested a 29-year-old man during raids on 3 properties. He's being questioned on suspicion of assisting an offender. 4 other men who've been questioned by detectives have been released on bail. That is the latest news. Now let's get the sport now with Shabnam.
Graham Potter says he's incredibly proud and excited to represent Chelsea after being appointed manager of the club today. He's left Brighton after 3 seasons to sign a 5-year deal at Stamford Bridge, and his first game in charge will be Fulham away on Saturday. Now let's head to the US Open tennis, where Britain's Joe Salisbury continues the defence of his men's doubles title with partner Rajiv Ram. Russell Fuller is watching.
It couldn't be tighter in this first men's doubles semi-final against the Colombian pair of Juan Sebastian Cabal and Robert Farah. We've had 11 games, 11 holes of serve. Salisbury and Ram leading by 6 games to 5, but they do now have love 30 on the Colombian serve, so are just a couple of points away from winning the first set.
And you can hear that over on Sports Extra now.
In the latest travel news, in Perth on the M90, there's queuing traffic in both directions at junction 12 at the Broxton roundabout because of flooding and debris on the road, a bit of gravel on the road there. There's congestion to junction 10 if you're heading north and south. Traffic is onto the A9 just after the Invermond roundabout. Also, there's buses running instead of trains on ScotRail on some routes because of that flooding in Perth, so just make sure you check before you travel today. In Greater Manchester on the M60 anti-clockwise, there's a lane closed because of a broken down vehicle at junction 15 at the Swinton interchange. There's congestion to the M62 Birch services. You're looking at delays of 20 to 30 minutes. In Bedfordshire on the M1 southbound, the entry slip road is partially blocked at junction 11A for Dunstable because of an earlier vehicle fire. Traffic's passing but slowly with congestion back to junction 12 for Flitwick and some slow traffic northbound as well. That's just people looking at what's going on. On the M25 anti-clockwise, one lane is closed from junction 12 to 11 for Chertsey because of an accident. Congestion is back to junction 14 for Heathrow Terminal 4. It's also slow on the M3 back to junction 3 as people are trying to join the M25. And on the M27 eastbound, there's long delays because of an earlier accident from junction 8 for Hamble to junction 9. It's all been cleared, but there's still congestion back to junction 4 at the M3 interchange. And also you're looking at queues through Hedge-End, Burleston, Botley and Swathling as traffic is trying to avoid the motorway. You're looking at delays of 50 minutes. Ellie Brennan, 5 Live Travel.
5 Live Drive. Claire McDonnell and Tony Livesey.
Welcome to 5 Live Drive. We are focusing on this news today. Senior members of the royal family are gathering at Balmoral after the Queen was placed under medical supervision. The Queen's condition has been described by doctors as comfortable. Well-wishers are gathering at the gates of the castle in Aberdeenshire and also at Buckingham Palace and at Windsor Castle too. Let's speak to the BBC's former royal correspondent Peter Hunt. Good afternoon, Peter.
Good afternoon.
We've seen pictures just after 5 o'clock this afternoon, a motorcade sweeping through the gates of Balmoral Castle. Prince William driving a car containing Princes Andrew, Edward and Sophie, the Countess of Wessex. We understand that all of the Queen's children are now with her. It is significant, isn't it, that they are all gathering there?
Yes, I mean, we have a limited set of facts and then we have speculation. So if we focus on the facts, we have the fact of the statement, which in itself was highly unusual at 12:32, where, as you were saying, we learned that the doctors are concerned for her health, that they've recommended she remain under medical supervision and that she's comfortable and that she's at Balmoral. And then the second fact was this: we learned that all of these senior members of her family coming together as a family, her children, her grandchildren, William, Andrew, Edward and Sophie flying up together, Charles and Camilla already there, Princess Anne already there, the expectation that Harry, another grandson, will arrive there, that they are there because they are concerned for their mother and their grandmother. And then we have the tone and the nature of the various public statements that have been made by people in public life. You know, just Jacob Rees-Mogg, the new business secretary, talking about his gravest concern, the Archbishop of Canterbury talking about his prayers being with the Queen, and the Prime Minister, the Queen's 15th Prime Minister, the last time we saw the Queen, a still image of her smiling, looking frail with a walking stick just back on Tuesday, the Prime Minister saying that the whole country will be deeply concerned.
And we are hearing well wishes from across the globe. We've had the Archbishop of Canterbury saying he's sending prayers. We've had the UK's new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, saying the whole country is deeply concerned. We've even had President Biden in the last hour saying his thoughts of himself and his family are with the Queen and her family. A reminder that this is the most famous woman on the planet. This is huge news.
Yes, I mean, she's known, isn't she, around the globe as the Queen in the UK or Queen Elizabeth elsewhere. And she is our head of state of the United Kingdom. She is also the head of state of 14 other countries. And also just as crucially, and crucially for her, it's been a key part of her reign and her raison d'etre and her passion, is that she's head of the Commonwealth. You know, 54 countries, most of them, the majority of them, former colonies, not all. Some have chosen, who weren't part of the British Empire, to join. You know, represents 30% of the world's population when you add all the people, 2.4 billion people who are part of the Commonwealth. So all of these people in many, many different countries around the world will know her, as we say, as Queen Elizabeth, and many people around the world will feel they have an affinity and a connection to her and have admired her either closely within the UK or from a distance over many years.
You covered the royal family closely for the BBC for many, many years. Whatever scandal hit the royal family, she seemed to be this kind of, to use her own phrase, the strength and stay in the middle of it. What are her qualities that allowed her to do that?
Well, it's interesting, actually. I asked this question of someone who knows her very well just a week or two ago, and one of their answers was she doesn't perform. You know, she is comfortable in her own skin, which isn't something that one can say about all senior members of the British royal family, and she does her duty. She has that in her since the age of 21. We all remember that famous speech that she gave in South Africa when she was still a princess, where she talked about her duty and following that all the way through her life. And it's a theme that she's returned to on many, many times throughout her life. I mean, even just at the end of the Jubilee, she missed many moments of the Jubilee because of this ill health that we're talking about now. But in the statement that she issued afterwards, she talked about being humbled and deeply touched. And she said, "And I remain committed to serving you to the best of my ability, supported by my family." And so that is what has sort of kept her going through this extraordinarily lengthy reign. And you talk about the scandals. I mean, she's been beset by them, hasn't she? I mean, she had the War of the Waleses in the 80s involving Charles and Diana. She's had the more recent challenges over Harry and Meghan's exit from the British royal family, and she's had Prince Andrew and his involvement in a scandal. And so all of these things have beset her, but she has managed to be not too tainted by it, and it has never been directly her. And as you suggest, throughout all of that, she has been this sort of icon of steadfastness and good behaviour for her personally.
She's lived through wars and most recently a pandemic. And we were talking earlier about the very personal message she gave in her Christmas Day address, which had echoes of, we'll meet again, the Second World War kind of response to coming back together with family. She manages to use language and connection with people to bring people together, to say, I know what you're going through. She's always managed to do that, hasn't she? To say, I am your monarch and I'm going through this with you.
Yes, because if you strip away all that she does and try and get to the kernel of what she's about, there's actually something called a cabinet manual that was formed after the coalition government in 2010, David Cameron, because we don't have a written constitution, trying to pull together some of the key things about how we function, how the government functions, how the head of state functions. And in that, there's one simple sentence, and it says the sovereign is the head of state of the UK, providing stability, continuity, and a national focus. And that really is, if you boil it all down, that is the crux crux of what she is about, that thing, but that purpose and function of national focus. And it was evident, as you suggest, in the speech that she delivered at the height of the pandemic, and that offering of hope, given the longevity of her life, that that things will get better, as indeed they did.
And it's so important to her, isn't it? I mean, even with the recent Platinum Jubilee, when clearly her health wasn't great, to make an appearance, to be out there, to show thanks to everybody for turning up to celebrate her reign. That can't have been easy for her.
No, and fundamentally she feels that she needs to be seen to be believed. And I think we all have elderly relatives who we may have grandparents, great-grandparents, and we kind of think, but don't we, by the age of 96, they could be putting their feet up, having a fag, having a drink and watching the racing on the telly. I mean, we kind of, we accept that there is a point at which they can stop, but she has not stopped. There is the core bit of her work that she has continued to do, and the sort of pandemic and post-pandemic use of virtual meetings, Zoom meetings or whatever, has been helpful given her ill health. And even with the key issue of the handover of power between the two prime ministers, that is one of the core bits of work she has to do as head of state. It would have been remarkably tricky to hand that on to Prince Charles, and she was clearly determined to carry on and do it and not go look for any mechanism whereby it could be handed on. She couldn't get to London, so they had to come to Scotland, but she still carried out her duty of saying goodbye to her 14th Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and saying hello to her 15th Prime Minister, Liz Truss. And of course, we remember that her first was Winston Churchill, who took part in the Boer War.
How much would you say it's really striking watching the faces and the understandably very concerned faces of Prince William, Prince Andrew, and the Prince Edward and his wife Sophie driving through the gates of Balmoral just a little over an hour ago. How much of a key figure is she within the dynamics of that family? How much do they still look to her?
I think she's a crucial figure. And I suppose it operates on two levels, doesn't it? I mean, these moments in our personal lives, we would be talking about it being our mother or our grandmother. So it operates on that level, and then it operates on the level of the institution of the British monarchy. And so they always, that's the challenge of that family, about how they function on two levels all at the same time. And so as a family, they are deeply, deeply, deeply fond of her, as is evident in all of the conversations and all of the statements they make about her. And then as an institution, they view her as very key. And that institution has been tested recently, not least by the departure of Harry and Meghan. And so they will have relied on her and her advice as they navigated that particular challenge.
Peter, good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us on 5 Live Drive. That is Peter Hunt, the BBC's former royal correspondent.
Yes, just for now, that statement we received from Buckingham Palace earlier today remains their only statement at the moment on the Queen's health. It's just worth reminding ourselves of what we knew this morning. It says, following further evaluation, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. She remains comfortable and at Balmoral, and we now know that she's surrounded by her closest family. Let's speak to Victoria Howard, who's editor of the Crown Chronicles. Hello, Victoria.
Hi there.
Hi, how do you reflect on what we've seen and heard today?
I think it just goes to show not only the seriousness of the situation, but genuinely how much affection people do hold for the Queen, whether they're a royalist or not. I think most people can agree that she's dedicated more than 70 years of her life to the service of the nation, the wider, the other countries in which she's head of state and the Commonwealth, and that the outpouring of kind of concern on social media, people turning out at Balmoral and at Buckingham Palace, it just really goes to show that she's a very well-respected and liked woman.
And a chance for reflection for us all today, really, because there won't be many people who can't remember life without her.
Exactly. And people often talk about the monarchy and the royals and what they actually kind of do for us. And, one of the things that turns up time and time again when you think about the positives of a monarchy in the UK is the consistency. The Queen has been here for 70 years, and particularly in the pandemic, for example, it's such a key example of this. The message she gave, her video message of "we will meet again," that was received so very well, just at the right time, just the right tone of a leader talking to her people. And that consistency, that the comfort that can be drawn from that in a world that's, the tumultuous nature of politics, how it gets very polarized at times, that is just one of the real core features of monarchy that people benefit from.
It certainly caught the mood, didn't it, that statement? When we talk about the respect and indeed love many people have for the Queen, does that enlarge to the royal family, Victoria? Or has she very much carved this kind of unique part in our lives at the moment?
I think Charles is still a little bit of a controversial, is probably a little bit strong, but he doesn't have the best kind of reputation amongst the people, partly because of, the Diana years and things like that. But it does, I think, generally go to the wider royal family. So William and Kate do have quite a good kind of relationship or popularity level with the nation. Harry did and probably still does to an extent. Of course, that's been a bit rocky in recent years with leaving the royal family with Meghan and the duties that come along with that. But I do think it kind of stems from the Queen herself. She has been the matriarch of that family, steering the ship, deciding how the monarchy functions as it moves forwards. And we don't always think of the monarchy as a progressive institution, but it has to move with the times, and the Queen has been the driving force behind that. So I do think that it does extend to wider members of the royal family and to an extent the monarchy itself.
Yeah, just to end, Victoria, just put into context for us the extraordinary length of her reign.
Gosh, yes. So Liz Truss is her 14th or 15th Prime Minister. She started with Winston Churchill, who was born in the 1870s. Liz Truss was born in the 1970s. So it's almost 100 years that these prime ministers have spanned in their birth dates. So that's really quite exceptional. She saw a man land on the moon. She's seen the birth of the internet and how we all now carry smartphones in our pockets. When, as a child, it was in the 20s, it was still very much your books and puzzles and things to play with as a child. So she really has seen things come so very far. She's seen the Second World War. She's done her service in the Auxiliary Territorial Service. And there are very, very few heads of state that can say they've seen all of these things and have the wisdom that goes along with it.
Victoria, thank you very much. That's Victoria Howard, editor of the Crown Chronicle. So the very latest, as far as we're aware at the moment here on 5 Live, the Queen remains comfortable at Balmoral and now all her children are with her. It is 19 minutes past 6.
Now, let's also talk about another major story this afternoon. The Prime Minister, Liz Truss, has announced energy bills will be capped at £2,500 a year until 2024. It means energy bill rises for all households will be limited for 2 years. Businesses are going to get help too, with prices capped for 6 months. The help is for everyone in England, Scotland and Wales, and could cost up to £150 billion. So let's hear from Liz Truss now, speaking in the Commons earlier.
This guarantee, which includes a temporary suspension of green levies, means that from the 1st of October, a typical household will pay no more than £2,500 per year for each of the next 2 years while we get the energy market back on track.
Yeah. Now, there are full details of the energy plans and what they mean for you on the BBC News website, so you can read a really detailed breakdown there. Faisal Islam is our economics editor. Afternoon to you, Faisal.
Afternoon, Claire.
So let's look at the detail. Lots of people saying, but what is that going to mean for my bill? And we don't necessarily have that detail yet, do we?
I think we have a broad, enough detail, actually, as regards households. But you're right to say, underneath the hood of this, the costings, the full mechanisms, how this would work in Northern Ireland, how this would work for businesses, how this would work for people off-grid on heating oil, were promised the similar generosity, but we simply don't have the detail on that. But the sort of mainstream point that they're getting across, which was, remember that Ofgem announcement, truly shocking Ofgem announcement 2 or 3 weeks ago, that the price cap which for a typical household would have equated to over £3,500 per year, going up from an already extraordinary, just below 2,000, that was going to come into effect on October the 1st. That is now not going to come into effect. That figure will instead be 2,500. So that is £1,000 less than we expected, and that will stay in place all the way through next year. And next year, the forecasts were truly kind of, and I don't think I'm overstating this, cataclysmic, saying £5,000 or £6,000. That will also be £2,500. Now, glass half full, glass half empty, right? The half full version of this is that we won't get those extremes. The half empty version of this is that they stay where they are and they get a little worse, actually, at a time when we know that many households that you speak to on 5 Live, that I speak to when I'm reporting for BBC News, already finding it really, really tough at £2,000 equivalent typical household annual bills, which is where we are right now. For it to go to 2,500, albeit with some support for the next few months that hasn't been replaced beyond that, people are still going to find things quite stretched. Just what the government's doing is taking away the absolutely extraordinary bills that were implied and suggested by Ofgem starting from next month. So I hope that's clear.
Yeah, no, it is really, really clear. I mean, it's going to be a cap on standing charges and unit rates. So the idea is if you use less, you will pay less. And if you use more, you will pay more. So you can't just look at that figure of around £2,000 and think, oh, great, that's going to be my bill. It does all come down to like the unit charge being capped. You won't be charged more than a certain level, but you've got to still watch what you use, haven't you?
Absolutely. They're trying to keep an incentive in there for people to economise on energy. Interestingly, it had been suggested that we'd get direct messaging from government for the public to economise on energy. Many people are doing this already off their own back for obvious reasons. We didn't quite get that clear steer. In other countries, in Germany, in France, in Spain, on the continent, they're saying, you do this, and the public sector especially, we're going to ban heated swimming pools, all that sort of stuff, turn off lights on public buildings. We haven't quite got that, we're not at that stage yet. The government's not there. I think, to be fair, this is a huge intervention, but it's mainly a statement of headlines and intent. I, as the economics editor of the BBC, we don't have a document really to look at how it all functions, works, how much it costs, how much extra borrowing it's going to be. And then for the other really important parts of this and the business side of this, again, you've had loads of case studies on your station all day saying how difficult it is, how people are packing up their businesses, unfortunately having to fire people just because the bills they're getting are so high. We're promised that there will be an impact, the equivalent impact, but what they can't tell us is the unit cost. And that is what all businesses tell us they want to know. They want to know what is the unit cost of their gas and electricity. And at the moment, and we won't be told for days, we don't have that detail. I'd love to be able to tell people that detail. At a time like this, people want certainty. Those businesses whose hands are hovering over their computer mice, wondering whether they can afford the cash flow, they want to know precisely what's happening. To be clear, we don't have that detail as of yet, but we have a big promise that what goes for households will also go for businesses.
When do we get that detail? Because it is so crucial. People, I mean, honestly, you're so right. Every single day, we were hearing from businesses earlier who've already decided to close because they just can't risk. I mean, it's just already got too expensive for them. Every day that passes, people edge closer to the precipice. When will we know the detail?
I think in a way, this announcement has come before everything has fully cooked in this plan, before the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And there is a reason why you'd want to do that as a government, because you just want to get into the mind of those businesses that are thinking of packing it in and saying, just hold off, just don't do it. The help is coming. And that's kind of what we've got. We don't have the detail. We're told it will come within days. I think a hard stop on this is sort of in the next couple of weeks, 11, 12 days, within which time we expect to have what they call a fiscal event, what would seem like a budget to me or you. They might not actually call it a budget for various technical reasons, but something like that sort of moment from the new Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng. At that point, we really would expect all the details to be nailed down. But, we're not just hearing this lack of clarity from households and businesses on the receiving end, also from some in the industry. They have agreed to accept this. They say that they will be altering the bills for households that they send out. They'll be reprogramming the prepayment meters. So that is the good news. Precisely as I say, how the back end of it functions and works, and whether it's up for a little bit more negotiation, and when we get the precise announcements that in particular business need, we're just going to have to wait, and we are continuing to ask the questions. But the government is totally committed to this now. But when you get an announcement this size, normally we would normally have all the detail and all the documentation to go through. And I just have to be clear and honest and frank with people that are listening that we don't have all of that detail, but we do have a very big promise from a new Prime Minister and a new Chancellor that they will get the same help businesses as households.
Which is good news. But equally, we're hearing from Tracy, who actually called us from hospital in the first hour of the programme. She helps out at a local food bank. She's got a health condition that she needs to have the heating on at home, and she's really, really worried about that. And even this figure that it's been fixed at, the average, is way too much for some people. I guess the question is, lots of people saying, and lots of other people getting in touch with us saying, I don't need this money. So why not direct it more with the people like Tracy, for example, who really need it and maybe need additional help as well? Why didn't they do that? Why is everyone getting it and we're not targeting it the people who need it the most?
The simple answer to that is that to have come up with a scheme where you qualify and where it is directed at those people that only need it would have been so bureaucratically cumbersome that it would have taken months. And the help, they wouldn't have been able to announce it. They wouldn't have, they're trying to get it in now so that the energy companies have got time to send out the right letters in time for October the 1st. So they really only had days to work with. So, I mean, I can almost hear some of the listeners thinking, oh, why are you making excuses? But I think there is a reasonable, I think there's a reasonable argument there to be had about a little bit like the furlough scheme was offered to everybody. Not everybody needed it. A little bit like some of the other COVID pandemic schemes, there was waste there, quote unquote, but you made sure that you got it to everyone that did need it, and a few people that didn't need it. Well, but it does create a dilemma. You are absolutely correct, because if you live in a massive house that's drafty, then you're also getting you're getting more subsidy actually than someone that uses it less. That sort of depends on actually for lower incomes you also get you get extra support as well. So it really depends on the circumstances. But yes, I think that's an argument that will be had, as will the argument about the funding. We heard that in Parliament about whether or not there should be a windfall tax. Some of the details that have been left is that the government are going to take back really at source windfall profits that are being made by renewable companies. Pretty complicated, but they say if you change the system at source, you can basically get rid of those windfalls, but you don't have to tax them afterwards. But that's subject to debate, that's subject to negotiation, and they're going to go around the world trying to negotiate long-term contracts with the Qataris, the Norwegians, the Algerians, just to try and get an alternative to Russian gas. But hey, every other country in the world is trying to do the same thing.
Absolutely. Faisal, great to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us on 5 Live Drive. Faisal Islam there, our economics editor, coming up on 6:30.
Yes, news and sport on the way in just a second. Before that, let's return to our main story this afternoon surrounding the Queen's health. And senior members of the royal family have now gathered at Balmoral after she was placed under medical supervision earlier today. The new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, says the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has issued a statement too. The news actually about the Queen's health was revealed as MPs debated the government's new energy plans. Keir Starmer was actually on his feet at the time, giving his response to Liz Truss. Here's the Speaker of the House, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, then, in the House of Commons a little earlier today.
I know I speak on behalf of the entire House when I say that we send our best wishes to Her Majesty the Queen, and that she and the royal family are in our thoughts and prayers at this moment. I'm going to take no more, if there is anything else, we will update the House accordingly. Thank you.
Well, let's speak to our political correspondent, Leila Nathu. Leila, we had an indication there of the seriousness of the situation when that very important debate was interrupted.
Yeah, I was there watching that debate, and it was a very interesting moment in the House because, being primed to see this major policy announcement there. Liz Truss on her feet, then Keir Starmer responding, interjections from various Tory and Labour MPs. Clearly this huge policy announcement that we were all poised to dissect. And then after, as you say, Keir Starmer was on his feet, you could see Nadhim Zahawi, Cabinet Minister, come in and whisper something into Liz Truss's ear. Then Angela Rayner received a note, Labour's deputy leader, and then you could see the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, also being briefed on something. So it was clear, even before we'd heard from Buckingham Palace, that there was something serious underway that was a sort of cross-party event. And then the statement from Buckingham Palace came. And then, as you say, Lindsay Hoyle interrupted that debate to make that statement, saying that his thoughts were with the royal family.
And we've touched later a little bit on what Liz Truss had to say. Just take us through the tributes that we've heard, or not the tributes, sorry, the well-wishes that we've had from the leaders.
Well, I mean, Liz Truss immediately put out a statement saying that, the country would be concerned by the news coming from Buckingham Palace this lunchtime, and saying that her thoughts and the thoughts of the people across the UK were with Her Majesty the Queen. Sir Keir Starmer saying shortly after, similarly, that his thoughts were with.
Yes, Layla, thank you very much indeed. We'll end that interview there. That's Layla Nathu, our political correspondent.
You are listening to BBC Radio 5 Live. It is just after 6:30. We are interrupting our normal programme to bring you some very important news. Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. This news just coming into us.
Yes, the palace hasn't yet given any further details of the circumstances surrounding the Queen's death. However, we are expecting a statement to be released shortly. Just to repeat that news, then, we are now interrupting our normal programming to bring you the very important news that Buckingham Palace has just announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Queen Elizabeth was 96, and her death brings to an end the longest reign in British history, spanning 7 decades of immense change. Throughout that time, she was a symbol of stability and continuity, her life underpinned by her devotion to duty.
Just to repeat then the news for those of us just joining us, Buckingham Palace has announced in the last few moments the death of Her Majesty the Queen. In a few minutes, we'll be joining the rest of BBC Radio for a special programme reflecting on her life, and we'll hear reaction from across the country, the Commonwealth and the rest of the world.
Elizabeth was just 25 when she came to the throne in 1952 on the death of her father, King George VI. Britain was still recovering from the Second World War, and many saw her coronation the following year at Westminster Abbey as the dawn of a new Elizabethan age.
The Queen was supported for almost her entire reign by Prince Philip. They married in 1947 and went on to have 4 children. He was at her side for 3 major Jubilee celebrations, and she once described him as her strength and stay. Her influence extended far beyond the shores of Britain. She was the most widely travelled head of state in history, the Queen of 15 nations and head of the Commonwealth of 54 countries and territories.
A reminder that we have interrupted our normal programme following Buckingham Palace's announcement of the death of Her Majesty the Queen. In a few moments, we will be joining the rest of BBC Radio for a special programme reflecting on her life and hearing reaction from across the world.
In the past few moments, the following statement has been released by Royal Communications at Buckingham Palace. It says this: "The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow." I'll repeat that statement. So this in the past few moments from Royal Communications at Buckingham Palace. It says the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. And also to repeat as well, we will be joining in the next few moments the rest of BBC Radio for a special programme reflecting on her life and hearing reaction from across the country, the Commonwealth and the world.